Chapter 1267. His Majesty has issued a decree. If there is anything, submit a memorial. If there is nothing, the court will be dismissed. High up in the hall, Gao Lisher's voice resounded through the entire hall. Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial. With the appearance of a civil official, the daily court session began once more. Wang Chang's eyes were half closed as he silently listened, saying very little. The Tang dynasty was rich in resources, its mountains and rivers beautiful. In terms of handling government affairs, it was brimming with talents. There was no need for Wang Chong to interfere. Time slowly passed, and government affairs were resolved with astonishing speed. At some point, more than half of them had been handled. Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial. At this moment, a voice resounded through the hall. Assistant Minister of Revenue Qin Yuanbao, ceremonial tablet in hand, suddenly stepped forward. Just a few days ago, this lowly subject discovered that someone had forged records and deceived the sovereign, infiltrated the imperial court, and even seized a high position. This subject requests that Your Majesty thoroughly investigate this matter and investigate it to the end. The atmosphere in the hall was calm, but Chen Yuanbao's voice was like a heavy boulder that set off massive waves. The other civil and military officials had yet to react, but the young and newly promoted officials in the ranks instantly paled. The Grand Preceptor, who had remained motionless for half the morning court session, was now trembling as if he had been struck by lightning. His face was ghastly pale, devoid of blood. Absurd! Chen Yuanbao, you're quite bold. Do you mean that all the officials of the imperial court are blind? With a thunderous roar, the Grand Preceptor was the first to stand up. He glared at Chen Yuanbao, his entire body bristling with shock. Correct. Chen Yuanbao, slandering a colleague is a major crime. If this matter is not investigated, will you be able to bear the responsibility? At this moment, King Qi also stepped forward, viciously glaring at Chen Yuanbao like he wanted to eat him alive. Even Chen Yuanbao couldn't help but grimace at the rebuke of two leading figures of the imperial court, and he felt an enormous pressure. The other courtiers also joined in the condemnation of Chen Yuanbao. In an instant, Chen Yuanbao became the center of everyone's attacks, and his face turned pale. Those who are innocent will naturally be innocent, and those who are corrupted will naturally be corrupted. Since you can enter the Hall of Supreme Harmony to participate in politics, don't tell me you don't even have the ability to withstand an investigation? At this moment, a cold voice rang out in the court. Wang Chong, who was standing at the end of the line, suddenly spoke. In an instant, it was as if a cold wind had passed through, and the condemnation of Chen Yuanbao in the court immediately lessened. As for the Grand Preceptor and King Qi, they grimaced several times, fear appearing in their eyes. Wang Chong was only 18 years old. In other words, he was still wet behind the ears. In normal circumstances, the Grand Preceptor and King Qi naturally wouldn't care about him, but after seeing Wang Chong's methods yesterday, both the Grand Preceptor and King Qi and even Great Prime Minister Li Linfu, who had been watching from the sidelines, were filled with apprehension. They no longer dared to view him as a brat. All those seated here are the backbone of the Tang dynasty, all of you having served in the imperial court for 10-some years. Are all of you so impatient? At the very least, have Lord Qin say who he is impeaching. Wang Chong indifferently said, his eyes brimming with derision. Wang Chong's words caused all the officials to turn green and white. Truly, they had been so focused on impeaching Chen Yuanbao that they hadn't even heard who he was impeaching. As important officials of the Tang dynasty, they truly were a little too impatient. Your Majesty, this subject agrees. Since this involves an important official of the imperial court, this subject believes that this matter should be investigated, regardless of whether it's true or false. This way, even if Lord Qin is wrong, this subject will be able to prove that Lord's innocence. A straight body does not fear a crooked shadow. This subject believes that there is nothing wrong with this matter. With a wave of his sleeve, the King of Song walked out from his ranks. Buzz. The moment the King of Song spoke, the entire imperial court fell deathly still. The Grand Preceptor and King Qi both paled. On the other side, the young and unfamiliar civil officials also became extremely unnatural. Even a fool knew that Chen Yuanbao's impeachment was aimed at them, and the instigators behind it were none other than Wang Chong and the King of Song. Lord Qin, please finish what you have to say. Which official do you wish to impeach? Wang Chong said. Yes, Your Highness. With Wang Chong's encouragement, Chen Yuanbao immediately calmed down. He turned around and deeply bowed to the seat of the Holy Emperor. Your Majesty, this subject wishes to impeach Assistant Minister of Personnel, Zhang Chaoshu. Chen Yuanbao pointed with his right hand and suddenly pointed at a young civil official near the front of a coiling dragon pillar. This person was precisely the young civil official who had proposed dissolving the prefectural armies. The Hall of Supreme Harmony was the center of the Tang dynasty, and those who could enter this place were all extremely old. Other than Wang Chong, the majority of them were approaching 40, and those who could reach the high position of Assistant Minister of Personnel were even older. But that official called Zhang Chaoshu was at most 34 or 35 years old. It was simply unbelievable for him to be so young, but no one had ever heard of this person's name. Buzz. Hearing Chen Yuanbao's words directed at him, the assistant minister called Zhang Chaoshu tried his best to remain calm. But Wang Chong clearly saw his Adam's apple move as he swallowed. Lord Chen, this lowly one used to govern the region, and all of my achievements are traceable. In addition, this lowly one has just entered the court and knows that my knowledge is shallow, so I have always been conscientious and never dared to slack off. May I know why Lord Chen is targeting this lowly one? It seems that Lord Chen is too prejudiced against this lowly one, and the country is more important. If Lord Chen feels that this lowly one is too young to be competent, then this lowly one is willing to resign and withdraw to maintain the harmony of the court. Zhang Chaoshu took a deep breath and quickly stepped out of the ranks. He respectfully bowed towards the imperial court. Preposterous! Zhang Chaoshu, stand there. I want to see who dares to frame you. In the imperial court, participating in politics and discussions is all about ability. Don't tell me it's all about age? As soon as Zhang Chaoshu finished speaking, a white-haired old official couldn't help but step forward and rebuke him. That's right. The affairs of the state must come first. King of foreign lands, even if you are a new prince appointed by the Holy Emperor, we will not fear you. Another civil official also stepped forward and harshly rebuked Wang Chong. Wang Chong coldly sneered as he watched. He recognized all of these people. They had been the Grand Preceptor's classmates and colleagues, and they had been extremely close to him. These two had clearly received the Grand Preceptor's orders. If one only saw their stern and righteous appearances, Wang Chong would truly believe that he had been wrongly accused. The Grand Preceptor is truly brilliant. This thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind. He had not spent 2 days in the morning court for nothing. During these 2 days, he had been carefully observing from the end of the line, and he had gradually begun to notice a few things. By replacing the King of Song's civil officials with unfamiliar faces, the Grand Preceptor's secret move had to be described as brilliant. What was even more amazing was that there was a group of civil officials who knew the ins and outs of this matter, but there was another group of civil officials who didn't know anything at all. They were all kept in the dark. Their trust in the Grand Preceptor seemed to surpass everything else. And those ignorant civil officials became the best way for the Grand Preceptor and the civil officials to attack Wang Chong. Some of the generals might even be fooled into believing that they had been wrongly accused. Alas, this trick is useless against me. Wang Chong sneered. If he had not made sufficient preparations, he would have never launched this counterattack. The Grand Preceptor and the civil officials' reactions were completely within Wang Chong's expectations. Since you want proof, I'll give it to you. With a flick of his robe, Wang Chong suddenly walked out of the ranks. He extended his hands, and 2 thick files appeared in his hands. These were the files that he had sent the eagle to collect and hand over yesterday. Lord Zhang is truly formidable. 2 sets of files. One is from the administration of Chun County from 10 some years ago, and the other is from the administration of Buckwheat County from 2 years ago. Both sets are actually new. The strangest thing is that Chun County is remote and the county government has been in disrepair for many years. Many files have gone missing or decayed, but only Lord Zhang's is still here. As for Buckwheat County, I've investigated it. Lord Zhang truly did hold office there, but only for a little more than a month. Lord Zhang, your achievements are truly outstanding. Not even this king is capable of transferring a county in 1 month. With these last words, Wang Chong turned to Zhang Chaoshu, his eyes sharp. Buzz! The sight of the 2 sets of files in Wang Chong's hands instantly caused the blood to drain from Zhang Chaoshu's face. He became ghastly pale, and even his lips began to tremble. He had never imagined that Wang Chong would take out his files. On the other side, the Grand Preceptor instantly lost his composure. How could this be? The Grand Preceptor clenched his fists, his expression nervous. Facts spoke louder than words. Only now did he realize that Wang Chong had come prepared, far more prepared than he had imagined. In the face of these 2 sets of files, Zhang Chaoshu's rebuttals immediately dimmed. More importantly, the files in Wang Chong's hands were undoubtedly real. No matter how meticulous a plan was, there was bound to be a flaw. At this moment, half the imperial court was deathly still. Even King Qi's lips were tightly shut, unable to utter a single word. Half the court was silent. Even those 2 old officials who had been so agitated and fiercely criticizing Wang Chong had closed their eyes. Wang Chong's impeachment was one thing, but he had even obtained Zhang Chaoshu's file. The evidence was conclusive. This was no slander against an official, but that he had come prepared. To speak at a time like this was simply asking for trouble. Does the Grand Preceptor have anything else to say? Wang Chong sneered, raising the 2 files in his hands as he stared at the Grand Preceptor. Chapter 1268. King of Foreign Lands, don't blame me for not warning you. Zhang Chaoshu is an assistant minister of the Bureau of Revenue, an important official of the imperial court. He entered the Bureau of Personnel and the Bureau of Revenue to undergo numerous inspections. Moreover, the imperial court has investigated him and found that he truly does have outstanding achievements. Civil officials are different from generals. If you slander an important official and insult his reputation, you should know what the consequences will be. If this matter is not investigated in front of the Holy Emperor, this old man will never let you go. The Grand Preceptor said, his face ashen. Wang Chong had even produced evidence, and not even he could do anything about it. Whether the matter was true or false, Zhang Chaoshu had to be investigated. Half-truth and half-lie are not false, and half-lie and half-truth are not true. Does the Grand Preceptor not understand this principle? Wang Chong looked up at the Grand Preceptor and blushed. He naturally understood the tricks these people were playing, but in front of him, they were just petty tricks. And Grand Preceptor, be at ease. I have even more evidence. In a few days, I will send it all to the imperial court. Buzz. The Grand Preceptor's body trembled, and he was instantly rendered speechless. On the other side, Zhang Chaoshu's face was as white as a sheet of paper. Your Majesty, this subject has nothing more to say. In order to prove my innocence, this subject is willing to accept the imperial court's investigation. Zhang Chaoshu finally walked out and bowed to the ceiling of the court. Now that things had come to this, it was no longer up to him. With the end of the court session, Wang Chong was the first to walk out of the court, his expression cold and aloof, his hands held behind his back. Unlike on the first day of the court session, all the civil officials were deathly silent, their eyes filled with fear as they stared at Wang Chong's back. In just 2 short days, Wang Chong, an advisor-in-waiting, had only attended 2 court sessions, but on the first day, he had refuted the Grand Preceptor, the King of Song, and Li Linfu, making them feel as if they had been beaten black and blue. On the second day, he captured and imprisoned Assistant Minister of Revenue Zhang Chaoshu, who had requested to disband the prefectural armies. His actions could be said to be swift and decisive. At this moment, no one dared to treat him as a 17 or 18-year-old youth. Even Prince Qi had a slightly more solemn expression on his face as he walked out of the imperial court. In the short span of a year, King Qi realized that the current Wang Chong was even more troublesome and difficult to deal with than before. Wang Chong, everything is just as you predicted. Putting Zhang Chaoshu in prison and making an example out of him will intimidate the other civil officials. Although we can't get rid of the situation of being suppressed by the civil officials in a short period of time, and we can't get rid of the constraints of the reduction of military strength, but there won't be a policy like dissolving the prefectural armies. A series of hurried footsteps sounded from behind. The tiger of the empire, Jiangqiu Jianqiong, had caught up to Wang Chong and stood beside him. His admiration for Wang Chong was sincere. It had been half a month since that incident, but Jiangqiu Jianqiong had been frowning in worry. As the Minister of War, not only was he unable to defend the interests of the Bureau of Military Personnel and launch an effective counterattack, he was also being suppressed. Wang Chong's appearance was like a ray of light. Perhaps he was the only one who could break the current stalemate. But will this matter really be enough to subdue them? The Confucians won't let this matter rest so easily. Jiangqiu Jianqiong asked. Jiangqiu Jianqiong's age and experience far surpassed Wang Chong's, but in this matter he had unknowingly begun to place more and more importance on Wang Chong's opinion. This is also what I wanted to say to Lord Jiangqiu. The Bureau of Military Personnel and the Bureau of Punishments have a close relationship, so I hope that Lord Jiangqiu can make use of your relationship with the Bureau of Punishments to dispatch more manpower. 1. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Jiangqiu Jianqiong's eyes narrowed, and his face warped in shock. Wang Chong, you mean, that wouldn't happen under normal circumstances, but we can't let our guard down. Even old officials who have been involved in politics for more than a decade can be replaced. If this goes on, what else is impossible? Wang Chong said grimly. I understand. Jiangqiu Jianqiong took in a deep breath, and in that moment, his eyes became extremely profound. The affairs of the royal court were quickly thrown to the back of Wang Chong's mind. After leaving the royal palace, Wang Chong swiftly boarded his carriage. Compared to the matter of Zhang Chaoshu, what happened next was far more important. The carriage did not return to the Wang clan as it usually did. Instead, it turned onto a road that it had never taken before. Your Highness, have we really subdued Zhang Chaoshu? Not long after Wang Chong boarded the carriage, Zhang Kei's voice came from outside. He seemed to be scratching his head in frustration. How did you know? Wang Chong opened his eyes. He had not told anyone about Zhang Chaoshu, and Zhang Kei could not enter the royal palace. Under normal circumstances, it would have been impossible for him to find out so quickly. Your Highness, don't blame me if I tell you. When I went to visit Master yesterday, I happened to see a file on Master's table. Moreover, when we were leaving the palace, I took a look and saw that the servants of the civil officials were all silent when they left. There was no disturbance like before, so something must have happened. Zhang Kei said. Wang Chong couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Zhang Kei's master was naturally the eagle. Wang Chong had not expected Zhang Kei to be so quick-witted. Although he was not in the royal court, he had still been able to immediately see through the clues. That's right. Wang Chong nodded. He knew that with Zhang Kei's personality, he would not easily give up unless he obtained an answer. Thus, Wang Chong gave Zhang Kei a summary of what had happened in the royal court. Although Wang Chong had simplified it, Zhang Kei was Wang Chong's commander in charge of intelligence, so this was enough for him. Your Highness, do you really have evidence against him? Zhang Kei looked at Wang Chong, his expression excited and expectant. But a moment later, Wang Chong's answer caught Zhang Kei off guard. Zhang Kei's expression froze. This answer was completely outside of his expectations. Wang Chong sat motionlessly in the carriage, his eyes half closed, but he did not explain. The Confucians had prepared for so long, and their preparations were almost flawless. Even the information on Zhang Chaoshu had been obtained by Wang Chong after a Herculean effort. 2 different files were far from enough to convict Zhang Chaoshu of a crime. But Wang Chong had never wanted to convict Zhang Chaoshu of a crime. As he was thinking, there was a disturbance outside the carriage, and Zhang Kei's furious and alarmed voice could be heard. What are you doing? Let go. Is it the king of foreign lands? At almost the same time, the voice of an old woman came from outside, accompanied by a fit of coughing. You've gone mad. Outside the carriage, Zhang Kei was dumbstruck. He had followed Wang Chong's orders and driven the carriage east, but for some reason, an old woman selling vegetables on the side of the road had rushed out, stopped the carriage, and grabbed Zhang Kei's reins. The old woman's expression was cold and harsh, and one of her hands was holding a basket of vegetables, but her eyes were not on Jean. Quebec galloping through the streets was extremely dangerous, but this old woman seemed to be completely unaware of the danger. King of foreign lands, do you dare to come out and meet me? In that instant, the old woman grabbed the reins with one hand while staring into the carriage and said sternly, King of foreign lands, do you dare to come out and meet me? Seeing that there was no response from the carriage, the old woman spoke once more. You've finally run out of patience. Within the carriage, Wang Chong lightly tapped his right index finger, his eyes half closed and his face expressionless. At this moment, the calmest person was probably Wang Chong. Pang! There was a soft sound, and the curtain in front of the carriage suddenly opened without any wind. Wang Chong was seated in the carriage when he saw the old woman outside. Around her waist was an apron stained with vegetables, and her silver hair was meticulously combed. Although her face was covered in wrinkles, her eyes were clear and transparent, completely unlike those of her age. We finally meet. Wang Chong indifferently said to the old woman, his face unperturbed. His tone did not seem like he was speaking to an old woman. The atmosphere was strange to the extreme, and Zhang Ke felt an indescribable feeling. King of foreign lands, you've succeeded. I admit that I made a mistake in this matter, allowing you to catch me, but you still haven't won. The old woman's eyes were wise, and her words were completely unbefitting of her status. Zhang Ke's heart chilled. No matter how slow he was, he could still tell that there was something strange about this old woman. She was no ordinary old vegetable seller. You did everything, right? The Grand Preceptor, King Qi, the Prime Minister, and perhaps even the first prince in the palace. Everyone was used by you. Just who are you? I truly didn't think that the Tang dynasty would have someone like you, someone who could use all these people. Speak, after all you've done, just what do you want? Wang Chong got straight to the point, his expression grave. From Khorasan to the capital, everything had been shrouding his mind like a dense fog, but through Zhang Chaoshu, he had finally been able to break through this fog, forcing the mastermind to come and see him of his own accord. My goal in appearing here is very simple. I hope that the king of foreign lands will give up. The old woman said. Give up? Give up what? Wang Chong sneered. Give up on the Tang dynasty and let the surrounding foreigners and the Arabs invade the Tang dynasty? Or give up on trying to stop you and have you disband the prefectural armies, turning the empire into a land of Azuras? Can war solve all problems? Even if you can protect this country for a while, can you protect this empire for an eternity? War has no end. Today, you have galloped through Arabia, killing millions of soldiers. The entire Tang dynasty regards you as a hero, but have you ever thought about the people of other countries? Have you ever thought about Arabia? Chapter 1269. They've lost so many people in battle. How could they just let this matter rest? Even if they can't beat you now, what about 10 years from now? What about 100 years from now? Once you're dead, they'll still start a war. This hatred will only deepen until it can never be resolved, a dead knot that can never be untied. In the end, the unlucky ones will be the common people of the Central Plains. When this land is covered in corpses and rivers of blood, is this what you want to see? The old woman coldly said, her basket hanging from her shoulder. Heh! Upon hearing the old woman's words, a smile suddenly appeared on Wang Chong's face. War truly cannot resolve all problems, but can compromise obtain peace? Withdrawing from Khorasan, allowing Arabia to rise, disbanding the prefectural armies, cutting off your own limbs and crippling your own martial arts? Is this the best medicine for resolving war? Wang Chong sneered. Outside the carriage, the old woman was stunned, apparently stumped by Wang Chong's words. But a moment later, Wang Chong realized that he was wrong. The old woman's body trembled, the clarity in her eyes fading and turning turbid. What's going on here? How did I end up here? The old woman glanced at the reins in her hand and then at Zhang Ke and Wang Chong, a look of confusion on her face. Her expression was that of someone who had slept for a very long time and then awoke from a dream. As the old woman muttered to herself, she let go of the reins and vanished into the crowd on the side of the road. Zhang Ke had been watching her the entire time, And even he was confused as he watched the old woman vanish. Just what's going on here? Zhang Ke had originally believed that this old woman was some formidable character in disguise, but now he realized that he was wrong. Everything around him made him feel extremely strange. Only Wang Chong sat calmly in his carriage, his expression extremely calm, as if he had expected something. Ignore him. Let's go. Wang Chong indifferently said. Yes, milord. After a moment's hesitation, Zhang Ke cracked his whip and urged the carriage forward. While driving the carriage, Zhang Ke hurriedly looked around. He saw that everyone was pointing and looking at them. Zhang Ke's scalp went numb, and the strange feeling in his heart intensified. Ever since he was young, there had never been a day where he felt so strange. Go! The two pure white horses galloped forward. Before they even reached 50 meters, the crowd was in an uproar. From his high vantage point, Zhang Ke could see a bare-chested butcher selling pig meat by the side of the road. But a moment later, the butcher seemed to be possessed. He stabbed his cleaver into the chopping block, pushed through the crowd, and strode onto the street, blocking the path of Wang Chong's party. The king of foreign lands is truly twisting words and forcing logic. Using violence to curb violence is no solution. In the last few years, the imperial court has been at constant war on the border, with Uzun, with Mengshi Zhao, with the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, with Goguryeo. It's been hundreds of years without a break. Now that Arabia has appeared, the wars have not only not lessened, but worsened. The reason for this is that there are no treaties between countries. If countries can understand each other, interact with each other, live in peace, help each other, and realize the great harmony of the world, how could there be wars? Only benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust are the ways to resolve all wars. The butcher stood in the middle of the road, his hands still greasy from cutting meat, but his expression was cold and stern. These were not the words of a butcher. When he was still 3 or 4 paces from the butcher, Zhang Ke suddenly pulled on the reins and stopped the carriage. The scene before him left him even more bewildered. But Wang Chong's expression did not change. Agreements are meant to be broken. So what if you've signed an agreement with all the parties? A wolf is a wolf. When have you ever seen a wolf that doesn't drink blood or eat meat? If a piece of paper could resolve all disputes, then the wise and benevolent people of the Central Plains would have resolved this problem thousands of years ago. Why would they have left it until now? Only powerful strength can win the respect of the opponent. Only by subduing the opponent can one practice benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. What I am doing is turning this country into a wolf, not a sheep. Use strength to obtain the respect of the opponent, not weakness to obtain the humiliation of the opponent. Wang Chong was as steady as Mount Tai. No matter what that mysterious existence did, he would remain unmoved. On the street, the butcher shook his head and came to his senses. After looking around, he walked back to his butcher shop with a blank look on his face. The carriage continued forward, and a few moments later, a shrill voice rang out in his ear. King of foreign lands, you've truly gone mad. Humans are humans because they have benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. If everyone believes in your principles and follows the law of the jungle, how are you any different from beasts? Although I am not a general and have never fought on the battlefield, I can see the past and know the present. More than 1,000 years ago, the great Qin Empire unified the world and destroyed the 6 kingdoms, relying on its formidable martial power to establish the first powerful empire of the Central Plains. Isn't this the country of tigers and wolves that you desire? But King Qin conquered the world, but he lost the will of the people. In a few short decades he was overthrown. King of foreign lands, you are repeating the mistakes of the past. After traveling 70 or 80 meters, a girl of 7 or 8, dressed in a peach-colored dress and with her hair combed down, pointed a finger at Wang Chong in the carriage and harshly rebuked him. The surrounding crowd was in an uproar. Now, even the surrounding crowd had noticed this unusual scene. Zhang Ke pulled on the reins of his horse for fear of injuring the girl on the side of the street. What he felt now was no longer strange, but extremely uneasy. Right now, he had no idea who else was going to charge in the next moment and from where. The old woman selling vegetables, the butcher chopping meat, the little girl licking the tonghulu on the side of the street. That person seemed to be everywhere, causing Zhang Ke to feel a deep chill, his heart pounding with fear. That was then and this is now. The great Qin Empire has spent its entire life in internal strife, and the greatest opponent it has ever faced was the Xiongnu in the north, let alone a powerful foe like Arabia. The Tang dynasty is surrounded by tigers and wolves. If they don't use strength, do they use benevolence and righteousness to deal with them? Moreover, war is a waste of manpower and resources, and the common people loathe it because the method of war is wrong. In the 3 campaigns to the west of the Tsong Mountains, the Tang dynasty exterminated 1 million enemies while suffering very few losses. At the end of the war, they obtained 1 billion taels of gold. This gold can be used to support the empire, and not only will it not put any financial pressure on the imperial court, it can even improve the lives of the common people. Do you know how many merchants travel to and fro that cement road I built for the war? All of this has caused the economy to flourish, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. There are hard battles and good battles in war, and I used good battles. Wang Chong calmly said, "Absurd. Whether it's a hard battle or a good battle, it's still war. No matter how much you try to beautify it, you can't change this fact. A gentleman loves money, and he takes it in the right way. The people are like this, and the country should also be like this. This is why I returned your gold to the Arabs." At this moment, the 7-year-old girl suddenly woke up, and in the distance, a middle-aged man dressed in luxurious merchant robes walked out of a restaurant and loudly rebuked Wang Chong. "Buzz!" Wang Chong's pupils constricted, and his expression turned frigid. "This is not your silver, but the blood and lives of countless soldiers. You have no right to deal with it. This is what the Tang dynasty deserves. If you weren't so soft-hearted, this money would have already been sent to the Tang dynasty and used to pay for the pensions of the soldiers, the livelihood of the people, the construction of schools, the repair of bridges and roads, the adoption of orphans, and the repair of cities. This money has nothing to do with you, so what right do you have to speak of this in front of me? No matter how much money you get from killing, it is still a curse, not a blessing for this country. King of foreign lands, stop. The militarists have completed their mission, and now it is time for us Confucians to act. Only by carrying out benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom can we achieve the harmonious world. You are now one of the leaders of the militarists. If you give up, you will be remembered by all. Thousands of years from now, you will become a hero of the Tang dynasty, a hero that will be praised for generations to come." Several dozen paces away, the merchant had a solemn expression, his voice resounding as if he was making a promise. But Wang Chong only replied with a cold laugh. "Impossible." The distant merchant was clearly taken aback by these words. "King of foreign lands, even killing has an end. You've already killed 1 million people. Is that still not enough? Just when will you stop?" Another figure walked out of the crowd. When the world is at peace, Wang Chong will naturally draw back his blade. Wang Chong sat motionlessly in his carriage as he slowly said these words. "Buzz." Time seemed to stop, and all was deathly still. In the center of the street, the merchant said nothing, only gave Wang Chong a deep glance. "King of foreign lands, I believed that we were the same kind of people with the same goal, but it now appears that I was wrong." A moment later, the merchant deeply bowed to Wang Chong, the clear and penetrating light in his eyes vanishing. At the same time, the psychic energy ripples around him vanished like the wind. Silence. Absolute silence. Time seemed to stop and no one spoke. After a long while, as if awakening from a dream, the crowd buzzed and came back to their senses. As for the merchant and the merchant blocking Wang Chong's path, they muttered to themselves in confusion and began to disperse. "Oh!" Zhang Ke breathed a long sigh of relief, his back drenched in cold sweat. "Milord, did that person really leave?" Zhang Ke turned his head and looked into the carriage. Wang Chong nodded, unperturbed. Chapter 1270. That person, Zhang Ke swallowed and nervously said, "The one who has always opposed Milord and controlled everything from behind the scenes?" Is it the one who has always opposed milord and controlled everything from behind the scenes? This short journey, less than 1,000 meters, took half a cup of tea's worth of time. Although Zhang Ke had not seen this person's true body during this time, for some reason, Zhang Ke felt a sense of terror. This person was like a ghost that did not exist, yet seemed to be everywhere. This was a bone-chilling and frightening feeling. "It's him," Wang Chong calmly said. He was also thinking. By using Zhang Chaoshu as a show of force, he had finally drawn out this person from behind the scenes. Although they had only exchanged blows through the air and he had not seen this person's true body, Wang Chong had already gleaned a great deal of information. For the first time, Wang Chong had encountered someone in the Tang dynasty whose psychic energy was not the slightest bit inferior to his own. In their previous conversation, he had tried to use his psychic energy to find this person's true body, but this person had managed to escape. This should be a warning that he can't hold back anymore. "Alas, you've encountered me." As Wang Chong spoke, a brilliant light flashed through his eyes. "You're still a little too impatient." Suddenly, Wang Chong's lips curled into a smile. This person had done his utmost to conceal his identity, but Wang Chong had still managed to see through some clues. Although this person Wang Chong had encountered was not an old woman selling vegetables, a butcher selling meat on the side of the road, a 7-year-old girl, or a merchant walking out of a restaurant, they all had different statuses, different voices, and different words, but the person speaking was the same. A person could change their appearance, but their tone of voice, their choice of words, and their habits of thought could not be changed. In their first exchange, Wang Chong had more or less determined this person's age. Young man. At most 26 or 27 years old, but definitely no older than 30. Wang Chong leaned against the wall of the carriage, his fingers once again unconsciously tapping lightly. The fog that had been shrouding the capital gradually dissipated. Wang Chong could almost capture the appearance of the opponent who was hiding behind the scenes and controlling everything. However, even though Wang Chong knew his age, the doubts in his heart did not lessen. Instead, they grew stronger. Before this meeting, he had thought about many things. The Grand Preceptor, King Qi, and Li Linfu all had extraordinary statuses. No ordinary person could control them. Wang Chong had thought of many things beforehand, but the only thing he didn't expect was that the other party was actually a young man of 26 or 27 years old. This caught Wang Chong by surprise. Wang Chong truly could not imagine how this person could be so capable as to manipulate the Grand Preceptor, King Qi, Li Linfu, and even the First Prince. This was truly inconceivable. The carriage continued forward. Zhang Ke appeared uneasy the entire time, and Wang Chong sat in the back with his eyes closed in thought. Wang Chong did not return to the Wang clan, but stopped in front of a restaurant. Taibai Restaurant. This was the most famous restaurant in the capital, not just because nearly 100 of the best chefs of the Tang dynasty had gathered here, but also because the owner of this restaurant was none other than the illustrious king of foreign lands, Wang Chong. Not long after the consort Taijin incident, Wang Chong had bought this restaurant, and after several expansions, he had bought the surrounding restaurants and remodeled them. It was now 4 to 5 times its original size and 5 to 6 stories high. The interior was sumptuously decorated, fresh and elegant. When Wang Chong appeared at the door, the steward of the restaurant personally came to greet him and lead Wang Chong into a VIP lounge. Taibai Restaurant's business was booming, and nearly 10,000 people would come to dine here every day. But no matter what, the quietest, most secretive, and most elegant room in Taibai Restaurant would always be reserved for Wang Chong. Wang Chong pushed open the door and entered. A person was already waiting inside. This person wore a wig and was dressed in plain clothes. Although he had an Adam's apple, his face was pale and beardless, and he seemed to lack a masculine air. Instead of a masculine one, he exuded a strong feminine air. In the entire Tang dynasty, there was only one kind of person like this, the eunuchs of the imperial palace. Miscellaneous Niu Xiantong pays respects to His Highness, the King of Foreign Lands. The moment the figure saw Wang Chong, he immediately bent at the waist and gave a respectful bow, doing his utmost to curry favor. The attendant Niu Xiantong. Fifth Prince Li Heng was far more efficient than Wang Chong had imagined. Just yesterday, Wang Chong had spoken to him about Niu Xiantong, and Li Heng had already helped him get in touch with him. Wang Chong had appeared in Tai-Bai restaurant at noon, but he had actually come to meet with Niu Xiantong. This is the first person to be executed by 1,000 cuts. Wang Chong carefully examined the eunuch before him. This was his first time seeing Niu Xiantong. For some reason, the Tang dynasty had many treacherous eunuchs, and the most famous and formidable of them were almost all concentrated during the reign of the Holy Emperor. There was Eunuch Gao, the most loyal eunuch in all of history, Gao Lisher, who had given his life to the sage emperor. There was also Eunuch Li, who was crafty and shrewd. There was also Eunuch Li, who was infinitely greedy and dared to extort even an imperial great general like Go Xianji. And now, there was also Eunuch Niu, who served the sage emperor as an advisor and attended the court every day, Niu Xiantong. Niu Xiantong was different from Gao Lisher and Li Jingzhong. He was rather similar to Bian Lingqing, who had always used old matters to threaten Gao Xianxi. Both of them were intensely greedy, but compared to Bian Lingqing, Niu Xiantong was more perceptive and flattering, and he was even better at concealing himself than Bian Lingqing. Wang Chong had remembered him and used his relationship with 5th Prince Li Heng to contact him for no other reason than that he was bold enough to deceive the sovereign, distort black and white, and turn a crushing defeat into a great victory. This was the first person who had dared to deceive the sovereign and deceive the Holy Emperor. More importantly, this matter involved the second most authoritative figure of the Tang dynasty, Anong Protector General Zhang Shogui. There's no need for Lord Attendant to be so polite. Zhang Ke, tell the servants to serve the food. Wang Chong waved his hand and sat down in the room, indicating for Niu Xiantong to take a seat. Your Highness is truly too polite. If there's anything you need, you can just give me an order. There's no need to go through so much trouble. As long as Your Highness orders it, Niu Xiantong will do his utmost to ensure that Your Highness's orders are done. Niu Xiantong bowed and nodded, a fawning look on his face. Lord Attendant is too polite. Wang Chong picked up the golden-laid teapot and filled Niu Xiantong's cup, then poured a cup for himself. He nonchalantly said, I just so happen to have something to ask Milord. I heard that Milord just went to Yuzhou and met with Lord Zhang Shogui? Buzz. Hearing this, Niu Xiantong's fawning expression changed the next moment. Milord, Niu Xiantong stared at Wang Chong, a very uneasy expression on his face. If not for the fact that Wang Chong was a king, he would have already gotten up and left. He had received news from 5th Prince Li Xiong that the king of foreign lands wanted to see him, but from Wang Chong's first words, Niu Xiantong knew that the situation was completely different from what he had imagined. Lord Niu, there's no need to be nervous. Drink some tea. Wang Chong made a gesture of invitation with a wave of his sleeve. Your Highness, I don't know what you're talking about. Niu Xiantong did not answer the question. Wang Chong only faintly smiled. Perhaps this was the first time Niu Xiantong had accepted such a large bribe, or perhaps he was not sufficiently composed. Wang Chong's casual words had made him nervous. This was called having a guilty conscience. Lord Niu is truly quite bold. You even dared to take Lord Zhang Shogui's money. Wang Chong took a sip of tea and lightly blew on the foam. Boom! Like a bolt of lightning, Niu Xiantong felt like he had seen a ghost, so frightened that he almost jumped up from the floor. If Niu Xiantong had only been speculating at the start, then these words made Wang Chong's goal obvious. Lord, what nonsense are you saying? What Lord Zhang's money? Niu Xiantong forced himself to remain calm as he continued to make his final struggle. Wang Chong glanced at him and faintly smiled, not bothering to argue. In the Battle of the Northeast, the Shi and the Khitans won a major victory while the Anong Protectorate army suffered grievous losses. You were able to conceal such a major event, turn black into white, and even report it to His Majesty. You truly are quite bold. Bang! Hearing this, Niu Xiantong broke out in cold sweat and knelt on the ground with a thud. Your Highness, save me. Your Highness, save me. Niu Xiantong's face was pale as he walked around the table and grabbed Wang Chong's right leg, his soul about to leave his body. The matter in Yuzhou had nothing to do with me. It was Lord Zhang Shogui who forced me. If I didn't take his money, if I didn't do this, he would kill me and then pretend that it was the work of the Shi and the Khitans. Niu Xiantong's entire body trembled as beads of sweat fell to the ground like raindrops, instantly drenching a large area. Very few people knew that he had taken Zhang Shogui's bribe in Yuzhou. Other than him and Zhang Shogui, there were no more than 5 people who knew, and all of them were generals loyal to Zhang Shogui who had followed him for 10-some years. He could never have imagined that Wang Chong would know of such a secretive matter. Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh as he looked at Niu Xiantong kneeling in front of him, his soul leaving his body. He had only tricked him a little, but Niu Xiantong had revealed everything in detail. On this point alone, Niu Xiantong was on a completely different level from treacherous eunuchs like Bian Lingqing and Li Jingzhong. At the very least, Bian Lingqing wouldn't have taken this kind of money, and Li Jingzhong was much calmer. But this had saved Wang Chong a great deal of effort. Everything was clear now. Lord Zhang, you're truly bold. I already gave you a warning, but you still didn't listen. Chapter 1271. Wang Chong had a rough idea of why Niu Xiantong had done this. In Zhang Shogui's heart, the position of Prime Minister would forever be a sore spot. Zhang Shogui's obsession with the position of Prime Minister had already surpassed everything else. 10-some years ago, he had failed to become Prime Minister, but after 10-some years, his desire had only intensified. And if the Yuzhou army suffered a major defeat by the Huang River, even if Zhang Shogui had not personally commanded it, then Zhang Shogui's dream of entering the capital and sitting on the position of Prime Minister would be completely shattered if word of this got out. This was something that Zhang Shogui could not tolerate, and it was also the true reason he had taken the risk and bribed the envoy of the Holy Emperor. In all fairness, Zhang Shogui could not be considered a good person. He was conceited, hot-tempered, and his subordinates were far inferior to those famed generals of history. Not only was he not benevolent, he would even punish his subordinates at times. Wang Chong's last meeting with him in the capital had not been too good either. But despite his flaws and his intense desire for power, Zhang Shogui was truly a loyal and virtuous minister of the Great Tang. He was absolutely devoted to the Great Tang, and there was no doubt that he had no other intentions. Moreover, as the second in command of the Tang dynasty, Zhang Shogui was skilled in war, and his influence was second only to the Crown Prince's junior guardian, Wang Zhongxi. Gold cannot be pure, and no man is perfect. No matter what sort of flaws Zhang Shogui had, his ability to command truly was what the empire needed. Moreover, in the Battle of Talas, Zhang Shogui had dispatched 4,000 soldiers of the Roaring Tiger Army and several thousand soldiers of the Yuzhou Army. Now was the time for Wang Chong to return the favor. But not even Wang Chong knew how much he could help Zhang Shogui. When did you submit the memorial to Yuzhou? Wang Chong asked. He had been paying close attention to Zhang Shogui's matter, but alas, it had been several days since Niu Xiantong had returned to the capital from Yuzhou. Given the amount of time that had passed, the news of Zhang Shogui's false report had probably reached the Holy Emperor by now. Since ancient times, deceiving the monarch was a crime punishable by death. Even Wang Chong broke out in a cold sweat for Zhang Shogui, but Niu Xiantong's reply left Wang Chong greatly surprised. Your Highness, the report is still being delayed and has not been submitted. Niu Xiantong lowered his head and bowed. What? Hearing this, Wang Chong's body shook, and he sat up straight. This time, the Holy Emperor sent me to Yuzhou. According to the custom of the imperial court, the moment one returns from the border, one must report to His Majesty. However, when I went to see His Majesty a few days ago, for some reason, I was stopped at the door by Eunuch Gao Lisher. Eunuch Gao said that His Majesty's body was slightly unwell and had me bring the memorial to His Majesty in a few days to report the matter of Yuzhou. Niu Xiantong immediately knelt on the ground and recounted everything that had happened in full detail. These words greatly surprised Wang Chong, but Wang Chong quickly thought of something. The failure to break into the divine martial realm meant that His Majesty's condition was getting worse and worse. After several court sessions, Wang Chong had been able to sense that the Holy Emperor's aura had become a little chaotic. It was clear that this was the reason why Niu Xiantong had been stopped at the door by Gao Lisher. Great, If that's the case, there's still a chance to salvage the situation. Wang Chong mentally muttered to himself, his fingers subconsciously tapping on the table. How many people know that you helped Zhang Shogui conceal military intelligence and lied about your achievements? Wang Chong asked. At this stage, Niu Xiantong no longer dared to conceal anything and immediately revealed everything. Not many people in the palace know of this. The memorial I wrote for Lord Zhang Shogui has only been shown to the first prince and a few others. For now, no one else knows of it. What? Upon hearing the first prince's name, Wang Chong was stunned. In the past, Wang Chong would not have cared much, but Wang Chong now knew that the first prince, Li Linfu, King Qi, and the Grand Preceptor were all colluding. How did the first prince know of this matter? Wang Chong said. In truth, the first prince has long since taken over a portion of the imperial court's political affairs. This is also His Majesty's goal of raising the first prince. This time, His Majesty is meditating alone, and no one else is allowed an audience. Thus, in accordance with the rules, I first gave the memorial I drafted to the first prince to look over. In the future, when I meet with the Holy Emperor, I will make another copy. Only then will it be the original. Niu Xiantong kneeled on the ground, his entire body trembling. I was also forced to do this. No matter what, Your Highness must help me. After saying this, Niu Xiantong tightly clung to Wang Chong's leg like he was clinging to a life-saving straw. He had dared to help Zhang Shogui lie about the military intelligence because he was confident that very few people knew of this matter, and secondly, because of Zhang Shogui's authority. In Yuzhou, Zhang Shogui's hand could cover the sky, and he could suppress even the largest matter. This, coupled with Zhang Shogui's coercion, had led to this matter. But now that the matter had been exposed, the crime of deceiving the sovereign was no small matter. Niu Xiantong didn't even dare to imagine what would happen to him in the end. Lord Niu, at least you know your place and know to repent. Otherwise, what awaits you is death by 1,000 cuts. Wang Chong said from his sandalwood chair. Niu Xiantong's legs trembled. Although he didn't know what death by 1,000 cuts meant, and such a punishment had never appeared in the previous dynasty, there was no doubt that it was nothing good. Lord Niu, good medicine tastes bitter, and good advice grates on the ear. My advice to you is to immediately report the matter in Yuzhou. In addition, immediately write a letter to Anong Protector General Zhang Shogui. Tell him that the matter has been exposed and have him confess to the imperial court. If this is the case, there is still time. Otherwise, in the several decades of the Tang dynasty's prosperity, no one has ever dared to deceive the Holy Emperor. You know what will happen. Understood, understood. This old servant knows what to do. Niu Xiantong fearfully said. Wang Chong said nothing more. With a wave of his sleeve, he stood up from his seat. No matter what, Niu Xiantong's matter would never be resolved peacefully. Just the fact that he had deceived the Holy Emperor meant that no one could save him. But now, at the very least, he wouldn't have to die. Wang Chong quickly left the room, and behind him, Niu Xiantong was collapsed on the ground. His robe, from top to bottom, from inside to outside, was completely soaked. Let's go. In addition, send him a table of food. He probably won't be able to eat for more than a few days. Wang Chong said. Yes, my lord. When Wang Chong left Taibai Pavilion, he saw a figure standing on the street, waiting for him. My lord. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Su Kui immediately went up to welcome him. How is it? Wang Chong asked. My lord, the letter to the Anong Protector General has been prepared and can be sent to Yuzhou at any time. While Wang Chong was chatting with Niu Xiantong in the guest room of Taibai Pavilion, Su Kui was in the room next door. By the time Wang Chong came out of the guest room, Su Kui had already finished writing the letter. Very good. Use the fastest eagle and send it out now. Wang Chong said. Yes, my lord. Time slowly passed, and after leaving Taibai Pavilion, Wang Chong did not linger, immediately returning to his home. In the darkness of the night, the Wang clan was quiet. Many of the maids and servants had already gone to sleep, but a single candle was still lit in Wang Chong's study. Wang Chong was seated in his room, showing no intention of sleeping. He seemed to be waiting for something. Thump thump. After an unknown period of time, a soft knocking sound came from outside the study. "Come in," Wang Chong said. The tightly shut door opened by a sliver, and the black-robed eagle flashed in like a specter. Eagle pays respect to milord. 4 or 5 steps away from Wang Chong, Eagle got down on one knee and respectfully said, "Have you found anything?" Wang Chong opened his eyes and said, "Milord, just as you expected after you impeached Zhang Chaoshu, those people really did make a move. Our men have been keeping an eye on the place where the files and documents are stored. When it was about time, our men went in to search for the files of the others and discovered this." As Old Eagle spoke, he took out 2 thick stacks of documents from his bosom. He respectfully passed a stack of them over to Zhang Xian. Wang Chong's face didn't change when he took the first file, but when his gaze swept over the second file, his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Milord, our men checked it during the day. The resumes of those young officials who appeared in the imperial court were all written on brand new paper. Their flaws were very obvious, but when night fell, everything was completely different. From the toughness and elasticity of these papers, they should be very new. But they used some unknown method to make them look like they have been lying around for more than 10 years. Old Eagle raised his head and sternly said, "Knocking the mountain to scare the tiger, and luring the snake out of its hole." Wang Chong only needed to use Zhang Chaoshu to make the mastermind behind the scenes unable to sit still and take the initiative to show themselves. But the other party also took the initiative to change. Zhang Chaoshu's matter made them feel a great threat, and they did their best to patch up the loophole in a day's time. "Milord, I really don't know how they did it. Papers that are more than 10 years old must have decayed and cracked. It's impossible for them to be as well preserved as these files. The ability of these people is simply unheard of." Old Eagle sternly said, "They just use some special dyes and fire. It's not something too powerful." Wang Chong said calmly. Looking at Eagle's blank face, Wang Chong didn't explain much. In the other world, this kind of method wasn't too powerful. It was just an imitation of the past. But in this world, not many people knew about it. However, the efficiency of the other side was really surprising. Chapter 1272. "That's right, milord, there's another matter." As if remembering something, Old Eagle's brow twitched, and he raised his head. "Lord Zhangqiu just sent word that Zhang Chaoshu committed suicide in prison. Moreover, before he died, he left behind a letter, admitting that he had indeed forged his own file and taking all the blame on himself, putting aside the Grand Preceptor and the other officials. In his will, Zhang Chaoshu also mentioned that he had done all this out of a desire to serve his country. Although his methods were wrong, his intentions were not bad. But a country has its laws and a family has its rules. A mistake must be punished. I hope that your Majesty will not blame the Grand Preceptor and the other civil officials who did not know." The eagle recited the contents of Zhang Chaoshu's letter almost verbatim. "What?" Wang Chong's brow rose in shock at the eagle's words. He had already spoken to Zhangqiu Jianqiong, hoping that he would dispatch some men from the Bureau of Military Personnel to prevent any accidents. He had never expected Zhang Chaoshu to commit suicide. An excellent plan to cut off one's tail to seek survival. With this, I'll be able to brush off all responsibility. Wang Chong closed his eyes and sat motionlessly in his study. Wang Chong could not be sure if this was Zhang Chaoshu's own intention or if it was the work of the mastermind behind the curtains. But it was meaningless. With Zhang Chaoshu's death, there was no longer anything he could use against him. And then there were those old files that had been processed. Those new and unfamiliar civil officials of the imperial court were almost invulnerable. Not even Wang Chong could do anything to them. "I understand. You're dismissed." Wang Chong fell silent for a long time. Rubbing his temples, he finally opened his eyes. Things had already come to this point, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Wang Chong could only accept this result. "In addition, this silk bag is for you. Open it after you leave. Remember, you cannot reveal the contents of this silk bag to anyone else." "Milord." The eagle took the silk bag and quickly left. "It seems like I can't use Zhang Chaoshu anymore." Wang Chong muttered to himself. his fingers lightly tapping on the stone. The other party's reaction was faster than Wang Chong expected, but fortunately, everything was within Wang Chong's expectations. Zhang Chaoshu was only used by Wang Chong to scare them. They still had to hit the snake where it hurt. It was impossible to kill them with just these scrolls. Since I've already revealed myself, there's no way I can continue to hide. Next, I'll drag you out and see what kind of god you are. Wang Chong slowly closed his eyes, and the study gradually regained its peace. Wang Chong's uncle, Li Lin, arrived at noon the next day. "Chong, you were looking for me?" Li Lin was travel-worn. Before he stepped into the hall, his voice could be heard from afar. In the last half a year, Li Lin had diligently studied and trained, and he was now completely different from the person Wang Chong remembered. He was like a dragon or a tiger, and his gait was like a gust of wind and brimming with energy. When Wang Chong thought about how Li Lin had just been a minor officer at the city gate, he had changed so much that it made one's jaw drop. And all of this was thanks to Wang Chong. "Uncle, there's something I need to trouble you with." Upon seeing Li Lin, Wang Chong went straight to the point. Speak. As long as it's something I can do, I'll do it even if I have to dig 3 feet into the ground." Li Lin said, "There's some information on the table. I need Uncle to mobilize the people of the city guard and have them investigate the population of the capital. I want to focus on those Confucian scholars of 26 or 27 who haven't been in the capital for more than 5 months and who have some reputation among the Confucian scholars of the capital." Wang Chong pointed at the table. "Chonger," Li Lin blinked in a daze. Wang Chong's request was extremely strange, but Li Lin was no fool. In this period of time, the most lively matter in the Tang dynasty was the matter of Khorasan. "Chong, you've already found the tracks of those people?" Wang Chong nodded. "If my guess is correct, the people I'm looking for should be among them. I hope that Uncle can find these people as quickly as possible and take out their records." Forcing them out was only the first step. This could be considered Wang Chong's true counterattack. Perhaps the other party believed that he was being secretive, but to Wang Chong, as long as he revealed even the slightest trace of his tale, he could easily escape. Finding a young man of 26 or 27 in the capital was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but to Wang Chong, a young man of 26 or 27 who belonged to the Confucian school was much smaller. And someone who could mobilize the Grand Preceptor, Li Linfu, and the King of Song was definitely no ordinary individual. At the very least, even if he was disguised, he would still have some reputation in the Confucian school. Moreover, Wang Chong had lived in the capital for more than half his life and had a basic understanding of all sorts of people, but he had never heard of such a person. Thus, it was clear that this person was an outsider who had not appeared in the capital for more than 5 months. If he followed these clues, the number of people who fit the criteria wouldn't be many, not more than several hundred. And with the power of the city guard, it wouldn't take too long to filter out these several hundred people. "I understand. Leave this matter to me." Li Lin nodded, quickly regaining his composure and solemnly saying. Picking up the pieces of paper from the table, Li Lin stood up and left without a word. The entire Wang clan was enraged by that person who had controlled everything from behind the curtains and even stripped Wang Chong of his military authority. Li Lin had watched Wang Chong grow up, and he hated Wang Chong even more than Wang Chong himself for what had happened to Wang Chong. The carriage left as quickly as it had come. Li Lin hadn't even warmed his seat in the Wang clan before he hurriedly left, quickly arriving at the city guard. Come. Everyone listen up. Send everyone out as fast as you can." 26 or 27 years old, Confucian, young man who hasn't appeared for more than 5 months and has some reputation. Search according to these conditions. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, find that person for me. Li Lin's voice echoed throughout the city guard. All the high-ranking officers were called over. A moment later, the sound of war horses thundering could be heard as all the soldiers of the city guard were sent out like a swarm of bees. The tens of thousands of soldiers of the city guard began to move like a massive machine. The capital of the Tang dynasty was the center of the Central Plains, a gathering place for the common people of the 9 provinces. More than 1 million people resided here. With such a massive population and such a prosperous capital, it was no easy task for the city guard to conduct an investigation. Although the capital had a large population, there were far fewer Confucians. The city guard was completely capable of doing so. Wang Chong was in no rush, quietly waiting in his residence. The arrow had been fired, and there would come a day when it would land. Wang Chong was waiting for the final result. At the same time, in the northeast of Yuzhou, a small eagle flew down with incredible speed into the Anong Protectorate headquarters. "Bastard! Wang Chong, are you threatening me?" After reading the letter, Zhang Shogui slammed his fist against the table. The sturdy metal table twisted like a fried dough twist under Zhang Shogui's fist, and even the land of Yuzhou began to tremble. "Investigate! Investigate for me! Find out who spread the news. If I find out, I'll tear them to pieces," Zhang Shogui said through clenched teeth, his entire body seething with rage. "Milord." Behind Zhang Shogui, a pale-faced subordinate quickly turned around and left. "But milord, what about the capital? Niu Xiantong has already been exposed, and the king of foreign lands is using this matter to threaten us." A cautious and uneasy voice resounded through the hall. "Bastard! So what if I've been exposed? Am I going to be threatened by a brat? In this world, no one except His Majesty dares to treat me like this. In the northeast of Yuzhou, this old man can cover the sky with one hand, and everything is decided by me. I don't believe that I can't resolve this matter." Zhang Shogui's eyes were cold, his entire body seething with rage. "But milord," the general still wanted to argue, but before he could finish speaking, ping, a huge force exploded out, and this general was ruthlessly thrown against the wall. "Wang Chong, this old man truly misjudged you. In the Battle of Talas, this old man let bygones be bygones and supported you with 3,000 Roaring Tiger Army soldiers and several thousand Yuzhou soldiers, but you treat me like this. This old man will never be threatened by you." Rumble. The entire hall trembled under Zhang Shogui's rage. "Pass on my order. Cover up this matter for me." Flap flap. Countless birds took flight in alarm, and the lands of the northeast began to quake. Time slowly passed, and several days later, the efforts of the city guard finally bore fruit. Thud thud thud. A large pile of documents and files fell onto the desk in Wang Chong's study. The desk creaked as if it couldn't bear the weight. "Chong, all the information you asked for is here. Based on the conditions you proposed, we found 278 people, all of them rising Confucian talents who appeared in the capital in the last 5 months. But there was an accident. Of these 278 people, at least 63 have disappeared without a trace." Wang Chong's uncle, Li Lin, said from within the room. Wang Chong couldn't help but frown. "There's nothing we can do about it. There are many people in the capital, and people come and people leave. Not even the city guard can find some people. But according to the laws of the Tang dynasty, anyone who wants to enter the capital must have a pass. The city guard has records of this, and I've already sent people to investigate them," Li Lin said. "It's fine. As long as they haven't disappeared in the last month, there's no need to worry about them. Leave these files behind and leave the rest to me," Wang Chong indifferently said. After sending off his uncle, Wang Chong took up the file on the table and began to flip through it. Chapter 1273. 278 people was no small number, and the pile of documents on the table was like a small mountain. Any secret, no matter how perfectly concealed, would leave behind some clues. To Wang Chong, as long as there was anything suspicious, he would find the footprints left behind. In a little more than 4 hours, the pile of documents on the table had been reduced by at least half. Wang Chong had gone through them once and eliminated more than 100 people as suspects, leaving behind only around 120 people. Wang Chong quickly handed these documents over to his uncle, Li Lin. "Have the city guard move out and interrogate these 120 people again. In addition, these 30-some people are the most suspicious ones that I've identified. Uncle-in-law, I'll have to trouble you to send the experts of the city guard and imperial army to talk to them in the name of arresting suspects and protecting the capital. See if they're telling the truth." Wang Chong paused for a moment before continuing. When talking to them, pay attention to their wrists and see if there's any ink mark on them. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a brush from the brush rack beside him. With just a few strokes, he immediately drew a strange ink-colored mark on a piece of white paper. This was the same mark that Wang Chong had seen on the wrists of those 3 Confucian experts who had replaced him in Khorasan. The 2 were identical. Remember, don't let them notice. Wang Chong added, "Relax. Leave this matter to me. I'll personally handle it." Li Lin took the paper and the list of names that Wang Chong had recorded and quickly left. Time passed slowly. The entire City Guard division moved again upon hearing the news and quickly got into action. In the southwest of the capital, a wooden door towered over a quiet and secluded area. Nearby, a clear river gurgled by. Confucius said, "To govern by virtue, one should be like the northern star, occupying its place while all the stars move together." Confucius said, "The gentleman is considerate but does not compare. The villain compares but does not consider." Ji Kongzi asked, "To make the people respect, to be loyal and to persuade them, how?" Confucius said, "To be dignified and dignified is to be respectful. To be merciful and compassionate is to be loyal. To be virtuous and unable to teach, then to persuade." Early in the morning, the sound of someone reading came from behind the wooden door. A white-robed scholar, holding a feather fan and a silk scarf, was reading the contents of Confucius's Analects of Confucius. The scholar's sleeves fluttered in the wind, and he emanated a fresh, elegant, and otherworldly aura. Rumble! Suddenly, the sound of a carriage broke the silence of the morning. The young white-clothed scholar frowned slightly. Raising his head, he saw more than 10 soldiers of the city guard riding their horses over and stopping in front of the wooden door. "Li Junshan?" a soldier of the city guard asked. "Yes, I am. May I know what business you have barged in at this time?" The white-robed scholar said. He seemed to be very cultured. "The city defense needs it. I hope you can cooperate with us to do some investigations." As the leading officer spoke, he took out a book and began to ask questions while recording them down. The white-robed scholar had maintained an extremely cultured demeanor. Although he was a little displeased, he still did his utmost to cooperate with the investigation. Age, place of birth, purpose in coming to the capital, as long as he could answer, he would answer everything he knew. The investigation lasted for an entire hour. The white-robed scholar stood there, not showing the slightest hint of impatience. With the investigation concluded, the group quickly left. "Milord, I've seen him. There's no black mark on his wrist. He shouldn't be the person we're looking for." Once the carriage was several hundred meters away from the wooden door, the leading officer of the city guard quickly stepped forward and rode alongside the carriage. "I understand. You can go." A voice came from within the carriage. As soon as the voice faded, the City Guard Division officer bowed in acknowledgement and quickly left. Once the City Guard officer had left, Li Lin turned to Wang Chong. "Chong, this is the last one. None of them have the mark you spoke of. What do we do now?" Li Lin looked at Wang Chong, deep concern in his eyes. Wang Chong had been standing next to the City Guard the entire time, but of the 30 people Wang Chong had chosen as the most suspicious, including Li Junshan, none of them fulfilled the conditions that Wang Chong had spoken of. Wang Chong sat motionless on the side, his eyes closed as if in thought. None of the investigations had yielded the desired results. From this, it could be said that Wang Chong's deductions had been a complete failure. However, his expression didn't seem to be affected too much. If my guess is right, the other party should have made preparations. After a long while, Wang Chong opened his eyes and suddenly said, "Ah." Li Lin's body trembled, and he was instantly rendered speechless. "If that's the case, won't we never be able to find him?" In this period of time, Li Lin had learned a few things from Wang Chong. Given the abilities that the other party had displayed, if they had already noticed Wang Chong's movements and were wary, it would be very difficult to truly uncover them. Uncle-in-law, be at ease. This operation was not completely fruitless. Very soon, I will make him reveal his true whereabouts. Wang Chong indifferently said. As he opened his eyes, they began to exude a dazzling light. While Wang Chong was investigating the true identity of the mastermind, an incident that shook the Tang dynasty's imperial court took place the next day. Your Majesty, Subject Yi Haiqing has a memorial. Anong Protector General Zhang Shogui has deceived the sovereign and concealed military intelligence. He suffered a major defeat at the hands of the Shi and the Khitans along the Huang River, suffering heavy losses and countless casualties, but he concealed this fact. Not only that, Zhang Shogui even colluded with the Celestial Ambassador and secretly bribed the Celestial Ambassador, hoping that the Celestial Ambassador would deceive the heavens and help him turn a major defeat into a major victory. Zhang Shogui's greed for grandeur and recklessness has committed a crime of deceiving the sovereign. This crime of deceiving the sovereign cannot be lightly forgiven. This lowly subject has a letter from his subordinates. There is no doubt about this matter. Your Majesty, please investigate and punish him severely. Imperial Censor Yi Haiqing gripped his ceremonial tablet as he walked out of the ranks, his entire face ashen. Bang! Yi Haiqing's words stirred up 1,000 ripples. Hearing Yi Haiqing's words, the entire imperial court was shaken. All the officials, be they civil officials or military officials, revealed expressions of extreme shock. Even the motionless the King of Song, who had been watching from the sidelines this entire time, suddenly narrowed his eyes in shock. The Tang dynasty's holy emperor had reigned for 37 years. His political and martial accomplishments were peerless, and he was hailed as the emperor of all ages. It was extremely rare for an emperor to be publicly acknowledged as the emperor of all ages while he was still on the throne. But the Tang dynasty's prosperity and military prowess were something that everyone had witnessed with their own eyes. Even the barbarians were awed by it. Several decades ago, the Holy Emperor had unified the Tang army and fought north and south, defeating all his opponents and forcing all the surrounding countries to submit to him. The Tang dynasty was publicly acknowledged as the strongest empire of the East. And in the hands of the Holy Emperor, the territory of the Central Plains had expanded to unprecedented proportions. Not even the publicly acknowledged first emperor of the Great Qin or Great Emperor Wu of Han had been able to accomplish this. Moreover, the Holy Emperor's martial arts were extremely formidable. He was the only existence in the last 1,000 years who had infinitely approached the god martial realm. And the god martial realm was a true god. In the Central Plains, before the Holy Emperor truly assailed the god martial realm, even the supreme experts were nothing more than legends, illusory and unverifiable existences. In the Tang dynasty, everyone was filled with reverence for the Holy Emperor. No one had expected that someone would dare to deceive the sovereign, and it was Anong Protector General Zhang Shogui. It's starting so soon? Wang Chong stood at the very end of the line, his eyes narrowing as he listened to the uproar in the court. Almost instinctively, Wang Chong sensed the scent of a scheme. Starting from Karasan, the Confucian school had been doing its utmost to have the Tang dynasty cease military warfare and focus on culture, but the greatest opposition and resistance came from the great generals and protector generals of the various borders of the Tang dynasty. The proposal to disband the prefectural armies had already been thwarted by Wang Chong, but the Confucian school was clearly not about to let the matter rest. Zhang Shogui was the second most authoritative figure in the militarist school. He had managed Yuzhou into an impregnable fortress, treating it like his own territory. If not for this, Zhang Shogui would not have been so bold as to call a defeat a victory and lie to the imperial court. If they could topple Zhang Shogui, they could make an example of him. This was clearly the best warning the Confucian school could give to all the great generals and protector generals on the border. As Wang Chong was thinking this, he heard a loud roar. Absurd! Your Confucian school is willing to do anything to suppress the Bureau of Military Personnel. Zhang Shogui was the empire's great general and protector general, one of the empire's most experienced commanders. He had led the army in battle for decades and had never lost a battle. Even the Uzan Empire had suffered defeat after defeat at his hands, losing countless soldiers. He had guarded Yuzhou for so many years that the northeast was peaceful, and the Goguryeo Empire didn't even dare to take a step forward. How could he lose to the puny Shi and Khitans? This is slander. Your Majesty, please investigate. An old official from the Bureau of Military Personnel could no longer restrain himself and stepped forward. Zhang Shogui was the second most famous individual in the Bureau of Military Personnel, his status almost equal to that of the Tang dynasty's war god Wang Zhongxi. There was practically no one in the older generation of generals who did not know of such a person. How could matters of state and military be faked? The Anong Protectorate Army is strewn with corpses on the banks of the Huang River, their blood flowing like rivers, and countless soldiers still lying on the ground. How could this be faked? How could a Confucian scholar impersonate this? Moreover, Zhang Shogui has always been arrogant and conceited. The imperial court sending a Confucian scholar to supervise the army was the decision of the entire imperial court, and Zhang Shogui actually dared to oppose it. He even placed them under house arrest. This is simply impudence. Has the entire underworld continent become his personal territory? Does he still have any regard for the laws of the country, for the laws, for the holy emperor? He has always been arrogant and conceited, so isn't it normal for this sort of thing to happen to him? Chapter 1274. In the Tang dynasty, whether civil or military, as long as one was of the older generation and had served in the court for 10-some years, there was no one who did not know of Zhang Shogui and understand him. Duke Jiu's name was renowned throughout the world, and he was publicly acknowledged as a virtuous minister. Yet Zhang Shogui had still rebutted and insulted him. And if the Tang dynasty's war god Wang Zhongxi had not resigned his military authority and retreated bravely to protect himself, returning to the palace and becoming the crown prince's junior guardian, Zhang Shogui would have long ago become irreconcilable enemies with him. An Li Linfu was a member of the imperial household and the prime minister of the Tang dynasty, a position that Zhang Shogui coveted. In the entire Tang dynasty, other than the holy emperor, Zhang Shogui had no qualms about anything. There was almost no top-class individual that Zhang Shogui had not come into conflict with. This sort of impression was deeply ingrained in the minds of the civil officials. Moreover, the evidence of Zhang Shogui deceiving the sovereign is irrefutable. Haiqing, take out the evidence. As the old official spoke, he took 2 steps forward and spoke to supervisory censor Yi Haiqing. Yi Haiqing spoke righteously. He didn't say anything else. With a flick of his wrist, 2 pieces of paper fluttered in the air and appeared in front of everyone. This letter was personally written by Zhang Shogui's subordinate, a high-ranking officer who has followed him for 10-some years. He is also one of Zhang Shogui's former subordinates and has always been loyal to him. He had originally intended to conceal this matter. After all, Zhang Shogui was his superior, but after several nights of suffering for the sake of those who were about to die, he decided to speak of this matter. Ruler, subject, father, son. Zhang Shogui has truly failed to be a subject. Your Majesty, please investigate this matter. Buzz. The letter in Yi Haiqing's hand caused the hall to fall deathly still. All the generals paled, and even the king of Song slightly paled. The Confucians were not people of the martial path, so they would never joke about such a matter. It was clear that they had concrete evidence. Zhang Shogui was the second most authoritative figure in the military. From a certain perspective, his influence in the military was even greater than that of Wang Chong, and his seniority was not something that Wang Chong could compare to. The militarists were already being forced back again and again by the Confucians, and the situation was extremely bad. If even someone like Zhang Shogui was captured, no one dared to imagine the consequences. Your Majesty! Not only that, Zhang Shogui had even dared to bribe an emissary. Niu Xiantong was just a eunuch, but he actually had nearly 10 million taels of gold yuan certificates on him. Just where had he gotten all this money from? Moreover, not too long ago, Niu Xiantong had sent a memorial to the first prince. The contents of this memorial were inverting black and white, bragging on Zhang Shogui's behalf, making the defeat at the Huang River a great victory, and even begging the imperial court to reward him. Because of the severity of the matter, the first prince consulted us old officials. The first prince can personally testify for this matter. Your Majesty, please punish them severely no matter what. Another civil official walked out from the ranks, But what he said was one disaster after another. The situation was getting worse and worse for Zhang Shogui. The imperial court was deathly still. Even those generals who wanted to argue on Zhang Shogui's behalf were trembling, unable to speak. The Confucians had come prepared. The 2 letters of denunciation from Zhang Shogui's subordinates were already extremely unfavorable. Moreover, they had the support of gold yuan certificates and the first prince's personal testimony. The eldest prince was His Majesty's eldest legitimate son. Anything that involved the eldest prince was a sure thing. No matter how difficult it was to accept, this was a fact that they had no choice but to acknowledge. The Anong Protector General Zhang Shogui and his Yuzhou army, skilled in war, had actually suffered a crushing defeat at the Huang River, losing to the Shi and the Khitans. And they had even falsely claimed a deer as a horse to deceive His Majesty. How could this be? Can not even Zhang Shogui be saved? If this is the case, who will dare to contend against the Confucians in the future? Won't our martial path and the military path forever be suppressed by the Confucians? The Tang dynasty will have crippled its own martial arts? Once the barbarians invade, who will be able to contend against them? Below the first prince, an old military official with grizzled temples, had a heavy heart. He had been in the imperial court for several decades, but he had never encountered such a perilous situation. Upon entering the hall, this old official almost subconsciously turned his head and expectantly looked to the end of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, to that tall and slender figure near the gate. The entire military was in grave danger. Although he knew that this was an impractical idea, if there was anyone who could reverse the tides and change everything, it was probably the king of foreign lands. Buzz. Just at this moment, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. The old military official turned his head and was stunned to find that almost all the generals in the court were looking at the young figure at the end of the hall, just like him. Wang Chong mentally gave a long sigh. He could clearly sense the mood. Zhang Shogui's matter had caught everyone off guard. An invincible military official with elite soldiers under his command had actually suffered such a crushing defeat. To many people, this was something they would never have imagined. Lord Zhang, you truly are a hero for a lifetime, but a fool for a moment. Wang Chong mentally shook his head. In terms of pure ability to command, there was no need to doubt Zhang Shogui's ability. Back then, when Yuzhou in the northeast was in turmoil, Zhang Shogui had been stationed in Longxi and sent to Yuzhou to put out the fire. And Zhang Shogui did not disappoint. He successfully established the Anong Protectorate Army and firmly suppressed the Shi, the Khitans, the Western Turkic Khaganate, and the Goguryeo Empire, which had been wreaking havoc on the border. Even someone as arrogant as Yun Gaesaman, the king of Goguryeo, had turned from a tiger into a cat in front of him. All he could do was defend, not counterattack. For 10-some years he had been unable to sleep, fearing that Zhang Shogui would lead the Yuzhou army into his base. This was a true hero of the Tang dynasty. Even Wang Chong would heartily sigh in praise when he heard some of his deeds. Zhang Shogui himself was probably in the dark about the battle of the Huang River, but Wang Chong knew what was going on. The strength of the Yuzhou army was renowned throughout the world. If they had not worked together from the inside and schemed against the Khitans, they would have never lost to the Shi and the Khitans. On Mount Kangzimo, a figure suddenly appeared in Wang Chong's mind. As expected, this greatest threat to the Tang dynasty had begun to push aside Zhang Shogui. But Zhang Shogui had never noticed this. Wang Chong had warned him, but alas, he had been too conceited to the point that he would not listen to any advice, conceited to the point that he believed he could control both the Hu and the Han, control everything. He had never once believed that the bird he had raised would have the courage to turn around and attack him. This is the last time I can help you. Take it as me returning your favor. As these thoughts flitted through Wang Chong's mind, he quickly turned his head in another direction. There, a general was fidgeting, apparently waiting for something. When he saw Wang Chong's gaze, he immediately calmed down. Begin. Wang Chong shot him a glance. Your Majesty! This subject has a memorial to present. Just when the atmosphere was extremely oppressive, a loud voice suddenly rang out in the hall. Under the gazes of countless people, The general strode out with his ceremonial tablet in hand. This subject has a letter from Yuzhou, from Andong Protector General Zhang Shogui. This subject hopes to present it to your majesty. Hua! These words came out of the blue, and the entire hall was in an uproar. All the civil officials, including Yi Haiqing, looked at each other. Suddenly, their expressions became incomparably serious. What's going on here? How could there be a private letter from Zhang Shogui to the Holy Emperor? Yi Haiqing's mind was in turmoil. This matter had originally been in the bag, but now, things had taken a completely different direction. For a moment, he didn't even know what to do. Bring it up. At this moment, the Holy Emperor's dignified and resounding voice came from the hall. His voice was suffused with an awe-inspiring strength that instantly silenced the entire imperial court. The general held a letter with both hands, lowered his head, and respectfully walked up to the letter. When he reached the steps, Gao Lisher quickly stepped forward, took the letter, and placed it in the Holy Emperor's hands. For a moment, the mood in the imperial court was extremely strange. Everyone's eyes were focused on the letter in the Holy Emperor's hands, all of them speculating about the contents of Zhang Shogui's letter. Time slowly passed. In the hall, the sage emperor had a dignified expression, his face devoid of emotion. But to those old officials who were familiar with the sage emperor's taut brow had clearly relaxed after reading Zhang Shogui's letter. Your Majesty! In the battle of the Huang River, Zhang Shogui was blinded by greed. He feared that the Holy Emperor's rebuke would affect his chances of entering the capital and becoming prime minister, so he thought of bribing an angel. Just as supervisory censor Yi Haiqing said, there is no doubt about it. Zhang Shogui is duty-bound. Your Majesty, please punish him severely. But Zhang Shogui also had his reasons for doing this. Everyone knows of Zhang Shogui's obsession with the position of prime minister. 10 some years ago, if not for an accident, Zhang Shogui would have already become the prime minister of the Tang dynasty. Everyone in the world knows of this. Victory and defeat are commonplace for a soldier. As the Andong Protector General, Zhang Shogui made great contributions to the Tang dynasty. Moreover, although Zhang Shogui was muddle-headed, in the end he still remembered your Majesty's favor. He reined in his horse at the brink of the precipice, realized his error, and confessed to your Majesty. A flaw cannot obscure a jade. I hope that your Majesty will see clearly. The general bowed his head and respectfully said. In the hall, the civil officials, led by Yi Haiqing, had extremely nasty complexions. The general's words had reduced Zhang Shogui's crimes to the minimum. If the Holy Emperor had listened to his words, then this operation to deal with Zhang Shogui would have completely failed. Chapter 1275. Your Majesty, Lord Zhang truly was foolish, but fortunately, it was not too late. In the end, he repented. This letter is proof. I hope that your Majesty will look at this and deal with him again. Raising his robe, Wang Chong stepped forward. Your Majesty, absolutely not. A single letter cannot prove anything. Moreover, it is an indisputable fact that Zhang Shogui had bribed an angel, bribed an army supervisor, and lied about military intelligence. If he could remain unscathed after committing the crime of deceiving the sovereign, wouldn't there be countless imitators in the future? Nothing can be accomplished without rules. A country has its laws and a family has its rules. I hope that your Majesty will deal with this matter according to the laws of the Tang dynasty. Correct. I hope that your Majesty will uphold the laws of the Tang dynasty and deal with this matter severely. I hope that your Majesty will heavily punish Zhang Shogui. The Confucian civil officials in the court would not let Zhang Shogui's weakness slip by so easily. Yi Haiqing immediately stepped forward to make his case, and the other civil officials began to echo his sentiments, asking the Holy Emperor to heavily punish him. On the side, Wang Chong inwardly sneered at this sight. These Confucian civil officials were only struggling on the verge of death. The calamity of the Tang dynasty was upon them, and Zhang Shogui was one of the best great generals of the Tang dynasty. No matter what, Wang Chong had to protect him. This was both to return a favor to Zhang Shogui and for the sake of the Tang dynasty. How could he let them succeed so easily? As expected, the civil officials had barely spoken when a voice resounded through the hall. But this time, it was not Wang Chong, the king of Song, or anyone else, but the unmoving holy emperor. We already know of this matter. Although Zhang Shogui's false report is unforgivable, it has not reached the level of deceiving the sovereign. The holy emperor's expression was dignified, but his first words sent a chill through everyone's hearts. We did not receive a memorial from Niu Xiantong to conceal the military situation. Instead, we told the whole story of the Battle of the Huang River. We did not even conceal the fact that he accepted bribes. The gold yuan certificates I received from Zhang Shogui have already been offered up, and we have given them to the Bureau of Revenue to be used as grain for the Bureau of Military Personnel. As for Zhang Shogui, although he promptly repented and did not make a grave mistake, he still had such thoughts and cannot be forgiven. The words of the holy emperor made the hearts of Yi Haiqing and the others turn cold. At a time like this, the heavier the holy emperor's words were, the lighter they would be in the end. However, the holy emperor had already spoken. No matter how unwilling they were, they could not say anything else. However, Zhang Shogui is still a meritorious minister of the Tang dynasty, having made great contributions. Thus, we have decided to use Zhang Shogui's old contributions to atone for his crimes, stripping Zhang Shogui of his post as Anong Protector General and making him temporary Anong Protector General. In addition, he will be fined 5 years of salary and will not be able to be promoted for the next 5 years. Long live the emperor! Upon hearing the holy emperor's decision, everyone bowed and paid their respects. The holy emperor had never lightly expressed his opinions, but when it came to the holy emperor's decision, everyone had to abide by it, no matter what the final result was. Because this was the final decision. Wang Chong, I just knew that you would never disappoint us. The crisis over Zhang Shogui had finally been averted. The king of Song turned his head in Wang Chong's direction, a strange look in his eyes. Ever since his return from Khorasan, Wang Chong had resolved at least 2 crises. In this aspect, Wang Chong had become the stabilizing force of the military in the court. As long as he was present, no storm would be able to break through to the various corners of the Tang dynasty. Moreover, even the king of Song had praised Wang Chong's strategy. In every dynasty, the crime of deceiving the sovereign was no minor matter. Whether or not Zhang Shogui had done it, the mere thought of doing so was already a heresy, and he had truly bribed Niu Xiantong. For this alone, the holy emperor would not forgive him. But Wang Chong's cleverness lay in the fact that he had grasped Zhang Shogui's obsession with the position of prime minister. In truth, 10 some years ago, if Wang Chong's grandfather Duke Jiao had not stopped him, Zhang Shogui would have become prime minister. Moreover, if the holy emperor had been a little more resolute, Zhang Shogui would have become prime minister, and none of this would have happened. From this point, the holy emperor felt guilty. This was also the crux to Zhang Shogui's survival in this crisis. From the War of the Southwest to the Battle of Talas, in the short span of a year, Wang Chong had become extremely mature. He was completely capable of holding his own, not just on the battlefield, but also in the imperial court. The army could not be crippled, and Wang Chong had become the greatest hope and pillar of the army. The court session quickly concluded, and with a wave of his sleeve, Wang Chong walked out of the hall with a smile on his lips. Lord Zhang, a wise man submits to circumstances. After this incident, you should be more vigilant. Wang Chong raised his head and glanced northeast as he said to himself. Zhang Shogui's arrogance and conceit were renowned throughout the world. When he had Niu Xiantong write a letter to him and advise him to admit his wrongs, Wang Chong had almost immediately received the letter and received a harsh rebuke. One could easily imagine Zhang Shogui's foul temper. But even so, Wang Chong had been confident from the start that this matter would be perfectly resolved. The reason was very simple. Although Zhang Shogui was conceited, he was no fool. Deceiving the sovereign was no minor matter, and Zhang Shogui could not possibly endure such a major incident. I hope that you can learn from your mistakes. Wang Chong chuckled and quickly left. But behind him, not even Wang Chong noticed that someone was staring hatefully at him, an extremely nasty expression on their face. In truth, this matter was not caused by the Confucians, but by the prime minister of the Tang dynasty, Li Linfu. What Zhang Shogui had been constantly thinking about was precisely his position. By helping Zhang Shogui avert danger, Wang Chong had unquestionably made himself an enemy of him. One could easily imagine what Li Linfu was feeling. "Lord Prime Minister, let's go." A voice suddenly came from the side. An official had walked over without anyone noticing. "Oh, Lord Zhang, please." Li Linfu smiled faintly, like a spring breeze, and the hatred in his eyes quickly dissipated. The imperial city of the Tang dynasty towered with majesty and grandeur. When Wang Chong walked out of the imperial palace, dressed in a crimson imperial robe, the atmosphere was completely different from that of the imperial court. "Milord." Outside the imperial city, a luxurious carriage of gold and silver stood. Next to the carriage, a figure stood up and went to greet Wang Chong. But it was not Zhang Ke, who Wang Chong usually brought with him, but the eagle. He was wrapped in a black robe. Ever since Wang Chong had left him in the capital and put him in charge of building an intelligence force, the eagle had become much sharper and more capable. He was like a long saber that had been washed away, revealing its original sharpness. "How is it?" Upon seeing the eagle, Wang Chong's pupils constricted as he immediately asked. Although they were separated by a single wall, the atmosphere inside and outside the palace was completely different. And for Wang Chong, the moment he walked out of the palace gate, the matter in the imperial court had concluded, but the war outside the imperial court had only just begun. "Is everything ready?" Wang Chong glanced at the eagle and sternly said. His expression was solemn, completely different from when he had been in the imperial court. From Khorasan to the capital, he had always wanted to uncover the mastermind behind the curtains, and now, the truth was finally on the verge of coming to light. That person was finally about to reveal himself. "Milord, according to Milord's orders, everything has been taken care of. In a few more days we will be able to see him," the eagle sternly said. In his heart, he was no less anxious than Wang Chong. In the hearts of the eagle, Zhang Ke, and everyone else, Wang Chong's status was far above all else, even their own. Anyone who dared to treat Wang Chong like this, dared to treat the Tang dynasty like this, would never be forgiven. "Very good." With a wave of his sleeve, Wang Chong swiftly walked forward. "Then let us wait a few more days." With these words, Wang Chong swiftly boarded the carriage and vanished. "Hiya!" The eagle also took the driver's seat, and with a crack of his whip, the carriage began to move toward the eastern part of the city. Flap flap. As Wang Chong's carriage left the imperial city and began to head toward the eastern part of the city, a small but extremely fast eagle shot out like a bolt of lightning toward the northeast. "Milord, look." Several days later, in Yuzhou to the northwest, an officer of the Anong Protectorate Army rushed into the Protectorate headquarters and solemnly handed over a letter. Zhang Shogui took it, and with a single glance, his face immediately paled. He even broke out in a cold sweat. In his decades in the army, Zhang Shogui had participated in hundreds of battles and faced countless life-threatening dangers, but none of them had been as dangerous as the matter recorded on this thin piece of paper. For a moment, even though nothing had happened around him, Zhang Shogui felt like he had escaped death, that he had just escaped from the gates of hell. If he had not listened to Wang Chong's suggestion, the civil officials in the imperial court would have impeached him, and his decades of hard work would have been for naught. How could it be like this? Zhang Shogui muttered to himself as he recalled that youth in the capital. This time, Wang Chong had truly saved his life. "Investigate. Investigate for me. I want to know just who leaked the matter between me and Niu Xiantong." Zhang Shogui crushed the letter into a ball, unable to restrain his rage. The incident in the capital had truly shocked him, but what shocked him the most was that someone in Yuzhou had actually dared to betray him, and it had even been one of his close subordinates. "Yes, milord." The general quickly left, and with Zhang Shogui's order, the lands of Yuzhou began to tremble in an unprecedented manner. "Bastard!" Chapter 1276. King of Foreign Lands. I, in Yaluishan, cannot exist under the same sky as you. One day, I will tear your corpse into 10,000 pieces as an offering to Ashina's soul in heaven. The Hu leader's eyes exploded with rage and hatred. This was none other than in Yaluishan, who had met with Wang Chong once in the capital, had been pursued by Wang Chong, and had even killed his sworn brother, Ashina Sugan, at the hands of Wang Chong. Gathered around him were the generals of the Anong Protectorate Army. In terms of appearance, each of these generals had the strong characteristics of the Hu. And each of these people had incredibly powerful cultivations, and none of them were lower than Tier 8 of the Imperial Martial Realm. Moreover, these people exuded a thick killing intent, the stench of blood that came from those who had risked their lives in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. From this, one could see that these people had extremely high statuses in the Anong Protectorate Army. And all of these people had gathered around Yaluishan, following his orders. Yaluishan, now is not the time to be angry. The king of foreign lands is like the noon sun, and not even the Confucians can deal with him. We originally planned to use the Confucians to deal with that person, but he ruined all of our plans. If this continues, as long as the king of foreign lands remains in the imperial court, we won't be able to deal with him. A voice suddenly resounded from the mountain, and with this voice, there was a thump as a silver-white war boot stepped out. In the blink of an eye, a Hu man with a blazing aura appeared in front of Yaluishan. From the energy he exuded, this person was at least at the Saint Martial realm, and he had reached an extremely high level. That's right. The appearance of the king of foreign lands among the Tang people is definitely not a good thing. I have a feeling that he will definitely be a powerful foe in the future. At this moment, a second Hu general stepped forward, his aura even more powerful than that of the first Hu. You're right. Another voice rang out as another Hu general stepped forward. The winds howled, and everyone stared at Yaluishan in the center of the mountain in a deathly stillness. The Go-Chin star in the heavens, the king of foreign lands on the earth. There was a saying in the central divine prefecture that the North Star was the lord of all stars. It resided at the side of the Emperor Star, Violet Star, and assisted the Emperor Star. It was the master of war and slaughter. And in the Central Plains, Wang Chong's reputation was like the noon sun, far surpassing Geshu Han, and Sishun, Duwusili, Abu Muslim, and all the other top-class great generals. Now that the Arab governor of war, Qutayba, had been killed by Wang Chong was being hailed as the #1 war god of the West and East. His status was even higher than that of all the generals. Although there were many people who were privately unconvinced, in terms of military record, Wang Chong had won 3 battles in a short period of time, the Southwest, Talas, and Khorasan. He had vanquished more than 1 million enemies, a feat that few people in the world could compare to. Even for them, they were also quite fearful. This is not the time to talk about this. Yaluishan's eyes were bloodshot as he firmly declared. His gaze quickly turned to the 2 figures to his right. Zhao Qin, Baizhen Tuoyuo, you can no longer remain in Yuzhou. Our plan has failed, and that person will soon send someone over. I've already taken care of the Shi and Khitans. You should immediately escape. In an instant, the surroundings quietened down. Everyone turned to look at the 2 figures. One of them was dressed in a white robe, and his eyebrows and beard were all white, an extremely rare sight even among the Hu. The other person had a name that sounded like a Han and seemed like it, but if one looked carefully, one would notice that his forehead had the strong characteristics of a Hu. He was clearly a mix of Hu and Han. These 2 were both high-ranking generals under Zhang Shogui's command. But no one could have imagined that in the Battle of the Huang River not long ago, these 2 had used Zhang Shogui's orders to force Zhang Shogui's old subordinate, Pingla commander Wu Zi, to attack the Shi and Khitans. At the same time, they had leaked the information and the route of the army to the Shi, Khitans, and Eastern Turks, ultimately leading to this defeat. Understood. The 2 nodded and replied in unison. Whether it was the defeat at the Huang River or the failure of the plot against Zhang Shogui in the imperial court, someone had to take responsibility and draw out Zhang Shogui's anger. And this was something that ordinary soldiers could not do at all. Gallop, gallop, gallop. Zhao Kan and Baizhen Tuolyuo quickly mounted their warhorses and left. Not long after they left, rumbling sounds could be heard as the earth trembled. Countless Yuzhou iron cavalry were charging towards them. The 8th day of the 4th month, Buddha's birthday, was a fine and sunny day. At the end of the Sui and the beginning of the Tang, when Emperor Taizong was still a prince and his reputation was not that great, he had 18 senior Buddhist monks at his side, helping him repeatedly avert calamities in his early days and finally succeed in his empire. After Emperor Taizong succeeded to the throne, he remembered this kindness and returned the favor by allowing Buddhism to spread throughout the Tang dynasty. Thus, even though Arloja and Arayo, two Sindhi Buddhist monks who could not speak the same language, could still beg for alms in the capital of the Tang dynasty without worrying about filling their stomachs. Even now, Buddha's birthday had a great influence on the common people. On this day, there would be many commoners who would go to the nearby monasteries to bathe and offer flowers. There would be a parade of Buddha statues on the streets. At night, there would be a lively lantern show. Men and women in love would make a wish on the upper reaches of the river. Then, they would release hundreds and thousands of lotus lanterns to float along the river. Scholars, talents, and literary men would also be in high spirits at this moment. They would go to various restaurants and tea parties to compose poems and lyrics together. The eagle, Zhang Ke. Today is Buddha's birthday. Let's go out for a stroll. In the morning, the door to the study opened, and Wang Chong walked out after taking a bath and changing his clothes. Today, Wang Chong was not wearing the crimson imperial robe that represented his status, nor was he dressed in military attire. Instead, he was wearing an azure robe. His long hair, black and translucent, was tied up with a single hairband. He looked casual and natural, exuding a scholarly aura that was rarely seen on him. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals. When on horseback, they could pacify the 4 seas, and when off horseback, they could govern the world. As a descendant of the Wang clan, Wang Chong had inherited his grandfather Duke Jiu's temperament. After changing into a new set of robes, Wang Chong appeared calm and elegant, like a bamboo tree or a pine tree. Looking at him, the maids couldn't help but blush and fall into a daze. "My lord, the carriage is ready." Seeing Wang Chong, Su Kui quickly stepped forward and bowed his head. Wang Chong nodded, his expression calm as he leisurely walked to the door. A carriage was quietly waiting there. Wang Chong parted the curtain and saw a beautiful woman dressed in a white dress, a smile on her lips as she sat in the carriage. It seemed like she had been waiting for him for a long time. The sight of Wang Chong dressed in casual clothes, his scholarly and tranquil appearance, even the beauty couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. "Qichin, are you going as well?" The first to speak was Wang Chong. As he gazed at the fairy-like Su Yichin in the carriage, a hint of surprise flitted through Wang Chong's eyes. After returning to the capital, perhaps because she had put down her worries and had been carefully nursed back to health, Su Yichin's complexion was much better. Su Yichin warmly smiled and nodded. "After waiting for so long, I also want to go and see." "What? I'm not welcome." "You know that I'll never be able to refuse you." Wang Chong smiled as he sat down next to Su Yichin. The carriage set off from the gate of the Wang clan toward the eastern part of the city. After passing through many streets, the capital was completely different from the past. The streets were bustling with people, adults with children, singing and dancing in the crowd. The sound of firecrackers and fireworks could be heard throughout the capital. Moreover, on the streets, one could frequently see groups of 3 to 5 scholars who flaunted their elegance and recited poems. If the 2 masters were here, they would definitely be very happy. On this day, they could eat all of Chang'an. Su Yichin looked away from the window and smiled at Wang Chong, her expression suffused with the innocence of a young girl. Although she was called the Queen of Logistics and had helped Wang Chong manage the rear in an orderly manner during the Battle of Talas, even acting as a pillar of stability for the rear, when one cast aside the state she had been in during the war, deep within her heart, Su Yichin was just like any other girl, possessing a naive and unrestrained side. "You also know?" The smile on Su Yichin's face made Wang Chong's mood lighten, and even his tone carried a hint of a smile. To travel east and west, they have to pass through Qixi. When I was in Qixi, I met them twice and heard them talk about their days in the capital. Su Yichin couldn't help but chuckle. Wang Chong silently smiled. Su Yichin was speaking of when Arloja and Arloja had first arrived at the Tang dynasty. Because of the language barrier, the two of them had starved for 2 days in the capital. Later on, someone had reminded them, and the two of them had learned to bring 2 alms bowls with them when they begged for alms. Only now did the people of the capital understand that they had not come to recite scriptures or spread teachings, but to ask for food. Flap flap. In this joyous mood, the flapping of wings came from outside the carriage. The eagle extended his right hand and caught the bird, and then all was quiet. After some time, Su Kui's voice rang out in Wang Chong's ear. "Milord, the eagle has sent a message. We found it." It was just a simple sentence, but it seemed to have infinite magic power. The carriage immediately fell silent. Su Yichin froze, and then, as if realizing something, she immediately turned to Wang Chong. But Wang Chong restrained his expression, his eyes half closed, his face devoid of emotion. The 8th day of the 4th month was Buddha's birthday, but Wang Chong had not really come to celebrate it. After a long period of probing, Wang Chong had finally gotten close to the core of the truth. Everything was about to come to light. And that person who had been hiding behind the curtains and controlling all the officials of the court, even the Grand Preceptor, King Qi, Li Linfu, and the First Prince, was finally about to reveal himself. Let's go! Chapter 1277. Hiya! Outside the carriage, Su Kui solemnly shook the reins and quickly changed the direction the carriage was heading in. Drunken Moon Pavilion. In the capital, this restaurant wasn't very famous. At the very least, it couldn't compare to Wang Chong's Grand White Pavilion or the Yao clan's vast Crane Pavilion. It could only be considered average. However, Drunken Moon Pavilion, with its simple elegance and elegance, had attracted the attention of many literati in the capital. Even some ministers of the imperial court would occasionally visit this place to drink a few cups of wine, compose poems, and even leave behind their original works. Rumble! With a deafening rumble, a luxurious carriage of gold and silver stopped in front of Drunken Moon Pavilion. With a creak, the carriage door opened and Wang Chong walked out with a flick of his sleeve. In front of Drunken Moon Pavilion, a bowed figure was waiting for him. "Are you sure?" Wang Chong held his hands behind his back as he looked up at the black and golden signboard of Drunken Moon Pavilion. "Milord, there's no doubt about it. I'm the one who's going to deal with this personally. There won't be the slightest mistake," Eagle respectfully said. Ever since the men he had sent to follow that mysterious minor official at the city gate had been killed, Eagle had learned his lesson and become much more cautious. The men he sent were all top-notch, and there were even times when he would personally take action. The target this time was extremely important, so Eagle didn't dare to be careless. Wang Chong nodded and quickly looked away. There was an endless stream of carriages in front of Drunken Moon Pavilion. All kinds of carriages were parked here, the favorite vehicles of scholars and scholars. From the looks of it, this was a typical Confucian gathering and banquet. With a wave of his sleeve, Wang Chong immediately began to make his way inside. Milord, I'm truly sorry, but this store is already full. Young master, please return." Before Wang Chong could walk in, a servant hurriedly came to greet Wang Chong. He bowed and nodded, wanting to stop Wang Chong from entering. However, with a whoosh, Wang Chong had already brushed past his shoulder, crossed the door, and entered the Drunken Moon Inn. The servant was stunned. However, just as he tried to stop him again and chase after him, behind him, 2 bags of silver were tossed out. One bag landed on the counter and the other on the waiter's hand. At the same time, there was a flash of light. The eagle's burly body was already in front of the waiter. "My lord is handling some matters. He won't take up your place, nor will he disturb your business. Get out of the way," the eagle said as he flashed the dragon token in his hand. King of Foreign Lands. Although the eagle had retracted it quickly, The manservant had sharp eyes and recognized it at a glance. A trace of awe flashed across his face and he quickly retreated to the side. Wang Chong paid no attention to what was going on behind him. Leaving everything to the eagle, Wang Chong began to ascend the wooden spiral staircase to the second floor. Bang! As Wang Chong's foot reached the second floor, he felt a strange sensation. Wang Chong looked up and saw that the second floor was packed with distinguished guests. Countless grand Confucians had gathered here. These great scholars, grand scholars, and young scholars, all of them were virtuous and knowledgeable. They didn't do anything, they just knelt there, not moving at all, but they gave off a strong scholarly aura of the Tao of literature. They were clearly famous figures of the Confucian school. But strangely, on the 8th day of the 4th month, Buddha's birthday, the entire capital was abuzz with activity. Countless scholars would gather in this sort of restaurant, creating a lively atmosphere. But when Wang Chong ascended to the second floor of Drunken Moon Pavilion, he heard no noise. Not only that, in contrast to the joyous and auspicious atmosphere of the outside world, the atmosphere in Drunken Moon Pavilion was solemn and solemn. All these Confucians were sitting upright and still, their gazes fixed in the same direction. Even when Wang Chong appeared, they did not move at all, as if they hadn't seen Wang Chong at all. Wang Chong's brow rose, an indescribable feeling in his heart. It was like he had intruded on some sacred ceremony. Ding! At this moment, a metallic clatter resounded in his mind. Wang Chong turned his head in the direction of this metallic clatter, as well as the gazes of all the other Confucians. In the center of the second floor, Wang Chong saw a square that had been intentionally left empty. In this empty space was a young man dressed in a black robe, his sleeves flapping in the wind as he danced in the air. His sword dance varied in speed and speed, relaxed but not lacking in strength, free and dignified. His sword intent was imbued with some sort of divine and dignified aura, seemingly imbued with hope and entrustment. Wang Chong had been in the capital for 10-some years now, so he had seen and heard of all sorts of things. But he had never seen this sort of sword dance before. What a high cultivation! This person had his back to Wang Chong as he danced with his sword, but Wang Chong could clearly see that 90% of the time, this person was floating in the air, the tips of his toes only a hair's breadth above the ground. Although it was only a hair's breadth, achieving this was no easy task. Not even an imperial martial expert or an ordinary Saint martial expert would be able to do it. One could say that the slightest difference was the difference of 1,000 li. Swish! As Wang Chong looked over, the man finally turned around. At this moment, Wang Chong could clearly see that this person was wearing a white mask. This mask had no eyebrows or beard, not even a mouth. All that was left were 2 holes where the eyes should have been, and beneath these holes was a pair of sharp eyes. When Wang Chong appeared on the stairs of the second floor, a hint of surprise flitted through that man's eyes, but it only took a moment for the man to return to normal and continue his dance. Interesting. Wang Chong could clearly see the ripple in that man's eyes, but it only lasted for a moment before Wang Chong turned his head in another direction. As his eyes scanned the hall on the second floor, Wang Chong's gaze quickly fell on a white-clothed young man of 26 or 27 years of age, who exuded a scholarly aura. His aura was completely different from the others. This handsome young man sat there motionlessly, but he naturally exuded the aura of a leader. Among the group of great Confucians, he stood out like a crane among a flock of chickens. When Wang Chong saw him, the white-clothed Confucian also noticed Wang Chong. Wang Chong grinned, walked through the hall, and sat down across from the white-clothed Confucian. "We finally meet," Wang Chong suddenly said as he carefully examined the handsome white-robed Confucian across from him. If he didn't know, no one would have guessed that this white-clothed Confucian who didn't seem to know any martial arts was the mastermind who had been hiding in the shadows and controlling everything. He had been able to use the Grand Preceptor, King Qi, Li Linfu, and the First Prince, and had even transferred Wang Chong back from Khorasan and stripped him of his military authority. As expected of the king of foreign lands. "You were able to recognize me so quickly." The white-clothed Confucian faintly smiled as he looked at Wang Chong, his expression calm and unperturbed. So should I call you Li Junshan or Li Junxian? His gaze moved away from the white-robed Confucian and fell on the other scholar with a feather fan and silk scarf, and then he withdrew his gaze. The scholar sitting next to him was none other than the Li Junshan that Wang Chong had met behind the wooden door of the city guard. The king of foreign lands truly has a keen eye. I knew that you would come looking for me. May I ask, just where did I reveal my weakness? The white-clothed Confucian indifferently said. As he spoke, he took a cup of wine from the table and took a sip. You're too impatient and too greedy. You shouldn't have interfered in Zhang Shogui's affairs. Wang Chong indifferently said. Although none of the 30 Confucians that Wang Chong had been looking for when he had borrowed the strength of the city guard, Wang Chong had not come away empty-handed. At the very least, he could confirm that the person he was looking for was definitely among those Confucian scholars. Unfortunately, such a large-scale operation by the City Defense Division inevitably alarmed the other party. As a result, the other party had used certain methods, such as substituting a leopard cat for a crown prince, to conceal his identity. In normal circumstances, if the other party had not made any new moves, Wang Chong would have needed a very long time to find them. But just as Wang Chong had said, the other party had been too impatient and too greedy. Wang Chong was 80% confident that the Confucians would use this opportunity to deal with Zhang Shogui. Thus, Wang Chong had arranged for the eagle to plant spies among King Qi, the Grand Preceptor, Li Linfu, and even the First Prince. Wang Chong had borrowed the strength of Li Heng and Li Jingzhong to place spies in the palace. In Wang Chong's plan, there was an extremely high chance that the other party would act, and once they did, Wang Chong was completely confident that he could capture them, as Zhang Shogui's status was simply too high. And in order to deal with the second authoritative figure of the Tang dynasty, the other party could not just send a few small fries. They would have to personally appear. Leaders of the Tang dynasty like the Grand Preceptor and King Qi, especially the proud and conceited King Qi, would never receive an audience with an ordinary person of lower status. In order to deal with the Confucians and find the mastermind, this was the best opportunity. But Wang Chong was not completely confident. As long as the other party did not take the bait, Wang Chong's plans would be meaningless. Alas, the other party was still unable to keep his cool. As expected. So from the moment I impeached Zhang Shogui, I was already exposed, right? The white-robed Confucian had a calm and emotionless expression as if he had already expected this. Here. At this moment, a voice came from next to his ear. Wang Chong turned his head and saw a young scholar walking over with a tray. Bending down, the young scholar first placed a cup and chopsticks on the table for Wang Chong, then picked up the wine pot and poured a full cup for Wang Chong. After that, he took a black hairband from the wooden tray and placed it at the side. Wang Chong slightly frowned at the sight of this hairband. This is? But the young scholar did not explain. After placing everything down, he quickly turned and left. Chapter 1278. Come, Your Highness, please. A voice came from the opposite side. At some point, the white-robed Confucian had raised his wine cup in front of him and made a gesture of invitation. Brother Li is too courteous. Please. A strange light flashed through Wang Chong's eyes, and he returned to his senses. He raised his wine cup and clinked it against the white-robed Confucians. Busy. As their wine cups drew closer, the atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly changed. The Confucian scholars in the restaurant had originally been sitting upright and still, watching the young swordsman in the empty space. But at this moment, as if attracted by something, they all looked over. Clang! With a crisp sound, the next moment, the two wine cups collided in midair. The crisp sound was like thunder in the quiet atmosphere. But at this moment, something strange happened. Wang Chong's eyes flashed, and a majestic power immediately flowed through his arm, into the wine cup, and vibrated against the other side. But in the next moment, a strange feeling came from the other side. As the wine cups collided, Wang Chong clearly felt as if he had collided against an invisible mountain. The white-robed Confucian raised his wine cup high, a smile on his lips, and did not move at all. Not even the wine in the cup trembled. Interesting. Wang Chong smiled slightly and immediately increased his strength. An even more majestic power surged out like a river, boundless, and rushed toward the white-robed Confucian scholar. At almost the same time, an enormous power also burst forth from the white-robed Confucian. The two of them looked at each other, and the two powerful forces passed through their wine cups and collided in midair. But whether it was Wang Chong or the white-robed Confucian, the wine cups in their hands did not move at all. All of the shock and impact was completely isolated by the two of them. Even the wine in the cup did not shake at all, and it was as calm as the surface of a lake. The power continued to increase, and in a short period of time, the surrounding ground immediately began to tremble. This trembling was indiscernible at first, but in the blink of an eye, it immediately became violent. Very quickly, the surrounding tables, chairs, and dishes began to shake as well. The tremors continued to intensify, and in the end, even the entire restaurant was shaking as if there was an earthquake. All the Confucian scholars in the restaurant were shocked by the power that erupted from Wang Chong and the white-robed scholar, causing them to lose their balance and stand up one after another. Crash! A large number of cups and saucers couldn't withstand the force and slid off the table, shattering into pieces. Buzz! Almost at the same time, Wang Chong and the white-robed Confucian scholar withdrew their strength and put away their wine cups. The two enormous forces that could shatter mountains and split the earth disappeared at the same time. The two of them were simply too powerful. If they were to continue probing, the entire restaurant would probably be torn into two. Your Royal Highness has great skills. The white-robed Confucian was the first to take back his cup, raise his head, and drink it in one gulp. Putting down the wine cup, the white-robed Confucian scholar had a calm expression on his face. Even his breathing had not become chaotic in the slightest. It was clear that he had not used his full strength in the previous exchange. Good cultivation, Brother Li. At almost the same time, Wang Chong also drained his cup and placed it back on the table. In this exchange of probing attacks, neither of them had managed to gain the upper hand. I didn't think that the Confucians would have such a formidable expert. Wang Chong appeared calm, but his mind was in turmoil. Although Wang Chong appeared to be only 18, his strength was extremely rare in the world. Just based on his great general level, very few people could compare to him. Even someone as powerful as the governor of War Kataba had died at his hands, let alone others. Wang Chong had never imagined that there would be someone on the same level as him. In that exchange just now, although it had only been a small-scale probing attack, Wang Chong had sensed that the white-robed Confucian scholar's cultivation was on par with his, and his psychic energy was also extremely mysterious. Wang Chong was a grandmaster in the field of psychic energy, and even Mazel had died at his hands. But this white-robed Confucian scholar was not one bit weaker than him, and he could even change the energy of his psychic energy. This was simply unheard of. The restaurant was deathly still and tense. Everyone stared at Wang Chong and the white-robed Confucian, fearful that the two would start fighting again. Right at this moment, a clear and melodious sword hum suddenly rang out. In the center of the second floor, the man wearing a white mask and a black robe suddenly withdrew his sword and retreated from the empty space. All of you are dismissed. Right at this moment, the white-robed scholar suddenly spoke and flicked his sleeves. Yes. With this order, more than half of the Confucians in the restaurant withdrew, leaving only a small number scattered throughout the restaurant and behind the white-robed Confucian. With this simple order, the atmosphere in the restaurant immediately eased up a lot. Crackle. At this moment, the sound of fireworks and firecrackers came from the restaurant. Accompanied by the laughter of adults and children, the sound was particularly loud in the quiet restaurant. Ha! The white-robed Confucian across from Wang Chong spoke once more. He raised the silver wine pot and poured a cup for Wang Chong before filling it for himself. Your Highness is erudite and talented, and your grandfather is the world-renowned Duke Jiao. Does your Highness know what day today is? Wang Chong did not reply, only stared at the scholar. He knew that since the scholar had asked this question, he had something to say. The teachings of the West have spread to the East. Everyone knows that the 8th day of the 4th month is the birthday of Buddha. But how many people know that today is the day when the 100 sages of the spring and autumn period die? These words took Wang Chong by surprise, and he immediately raised his brow as he waited for the white-robed Confucian to continue. In the spring and autumn period, the kingdoms warred against each other, and the common people lived every day in dire straits. It was a time of true survival of the fittest, an age of azura where the world was plunged into misery and suffering. Later, the 100 sages propagated their ideas and paid an enormous price to change the hearts of the people. The concept of benevolence and righteousness was deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people, turning that era of beasts into an era of man, and achieving the great harmony of the world. The white-robed Confucian solemnly said. Wang Chong did not speak and listened carefully, but when he heard the words great harmony of the world, he frowned imperceptibly. In the spring and autumn period, although the kingdoms warred against each other, the 100 sages shone upon that era. Each sage was like a flame in the darkness, illuminating that era and guiding the common people in the right direction. But now, the 100 sages have died, and the people of the divine continent, including the surrounding worlds, have fallen into darkness. They have lost their way and become beasts once more. Losing the 100 sages is a loss for all of us. Thus, every year on this day when the sages die, we gather together to pay our respects to the sages. The white-robed Confucian said in a resounding voice. Wang Chong's mind trembled as he suddenly understood why he had felt so strange upon entering the restaurant. He also understood why there was that strange sword dance and why everyone was wearing black headbands. They were paying respects to the sages. King of foreign lands, you are the most talented person we have ever seen. In such a short time, you were able to pacify Mengshi Zhao and Arabia. There are even people in the court who call you the new war god of the generation. A person can live for 100 lifetimes, but they will eventually die. There are some things that have a value and meaning that far surpass the life of a single person. I hope that you can join us and lend me a hand. Together, we can fulfill the wish of the sages and make the world truly great harmony of the world. Not just the Tang people, not just the Central Plains, but all the civilizations and worlds, including the Turks, the Gogurians, the Shi, the Uzan, the Khitans, and all the other foreigners, as well as the Arabs of the Western world. There were conflicts, killings, and endless wars precisely because of differences in language and ideology. But if the world was united, if the ideals of benevolence and righteousness were deeply embedded in the surrounding barbarians, including the Abbasid Caliphate, and if they could unify their language, then all conflicts and killings would cease to exist, forever vanishing from the face of this land. This is the true method of ending war forever. This is the true great harmony of the world. The white-robed Confucian's voice was solemn as he spoke. It did not seem like the product of a moment of passion, but the result of thousands of careful deliberations. Wang Chong had been earnestly listening this entire time, not even interrupting him. Wang Chong knew far too little about these people, these mysterious factions that ruled over the Tang dynasty and controlled the Grand Preceptor, King Qi, Li Linfu, and the First Prince. It was because the entire world knew nothing about them. Wang Chong was well aware that this was his best chance to understand them. Great harmony of the world? The white-robed Confucian's final words caused Wang Chong's expression to darken and his brow to crease. If the white-robed Confucian had not said these words, Wang Chong might have felt some admiration for him, but the great harmony of the world? How many people with lofty ideals had there been since ancient times? How many had actually realized this? Even in another world, the accumulation of thousands of years would be nothing more than a pipe dream. Lofty aspirations could not overcome selfish desires, and ideals would always lose to the hearts of men. Since ancient times, whenever someone mentioned these words, it would always be accompanied by enormous amounts of blood and sacrifice. Most of the time, the words great harmony of the world became a tool for lunatics, delusional, and ambitious people to realize their own selfish desires. For their own stubbornness, they would drag everyone in the world into it and make them die with them. Wang Chong was not opposed to the great harmony of the world, but the great harmony of the world required eternal perseverance, the constant change of thousands of generations. It was not a goal that could be achieved in a few decades, 100 years, or even a single generation based on one's own hopes. They could never succeed. Such people would only bring disaster and destruction to the world. Chapter 1279. For a moment, Wang Chang's eyes turned grave. He had speculated countless times about his opponents. If his opponents were just a bunch of ambitious schemers, then no matter how dangerous they were, Wang Chong was confident that he could limit their influence to a certain extent. But if this was the harmonious world, then this matter would be far more serious than he had imagined. Impossible. You can't make it happen. Wang Chong calmly said, his entire being calm and collected. This was not a rebuttal, nor was it a personal grudge, but a statement of fact. These people had no idea what they were doing. Tigers and wolves were tigers and wolves. The surrounding countries of the Tang dynasty were just feigning civility and using them. To think that they could use a few schools to change the surrounding barbarians was a childish fantasy. More importantly, they had no idea that a great calamity was approaching. They had to face far more than just the surrounding barbarians. The Tang dynasty no longer had time. But he couldn't tell them this. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together, and how could they possibly believe him? Times have changed. It was naturally impossible in the past, but it's different now. The white-robed Confucian faintly smiled at Wang Chang's words. He seemed to have expected this and wasn't angry. The current Tang dynasty no longer has to worry about its borders, and it has even signed peace treaties with all the surrounding countries. The Confucian schools have spread far and wide. The Eastern and Western Turks, the Uzun, Goguryeo, Mengshi Zhao, the Shi, the Khitans, and even the Abbasid Caliphate have all established many Confucian schools. Many who have entered these schools to study benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faith. The Confucian ideology has penetrated deep into lands that have never been touched before, and it has even received the vigorous support of the emperors and khans. This is something that no one has ever done before. The barbarians are barbarians because they do not understand propriety. The beasts are beasts because they do not understand benevolence. What we are doing now is teaching them propriety, righteousness, changing their minds. As long as the barbarians understood benevolence, righteousness, etiquette, and wisdom, they would share the same thoughts as us. Then, there would not be so many wars and killings. Under normal circumstances, all lands belong to the king. Those who lead the land belong to the king. As long as they had the same thoughts, they would belong to the same country and the same people. This was the trend of the times, and no one could change it. This was the greatest change in the history of the world, the greatest unforeseen event. It was an achievement that none of the 100 saints had ever achieved. As long as this can be achieved, I'm willing to die 100 times. The white-robed Confucian, Li Juanxian's eyes were bright and his voice resounded. His expression was brimming with endless fascination, as if he could see through time and space to the boundless depths. Beside him, the other Confucian scholars were just as excited. What the white-robed Confucian scholars said was also what they were thinking. For thousands of years, countless people with lofty ideals had tried to achieve this goal but failed. But now, they had a chance to do so. Uzun, Goguryeo, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, Mengshi Zhao, Arabia, all the barbarians, all the countries on the border, had opened their tightly shut gates to the Tang dynasty, to the Confucians. This was the best era for the Confucians, the greatest era of all time. To all the saints. Li Junxian suddenly raised his wine cup to the air. To all the saints. At almost the same time, a resounding voice resounded through the restaurant. All the Confucian scholars that remained in the restaurant raised their wine cups to the air. This was a ceremony, and even in front of Wang Chong, none of them had any intention of concealing it. For a moment, the entire restaurant was deathly still. As Wang Chong gazed at the solemn and respectful expressions on the faces of these Confucians, his heart sank. But deep in his heart, Wang Chong slowly steeled his resolve. King of foreign lands, I know what you're thinking. But if you experienced what I experienced, you would assuredly agree with our current goals and ideals. Across from him, Li Junxian faintly smiled, exuding a scholarly aura. Although this was the anniversary of the death of 100 saints, Li Junxian's eyes and ears were sharp, and he had long ago taken note of Wang Chang's reaction. I was adopted by the Confucians as a child. At the age of 3, I studied etiquette and righteousness. At the age of 5, and by the age of 6, I was well-read. From ancient times to modern times, there was nothing that I did not know about. The classics of the state, the private collections, the classics and histories, the unofficial histories. By the time I was 7, there were no books that I could read, no teachers that could teach me. It was at that time that I first came into contact with the concept of the harmonious world. At the time, I didn't have much understanding of the harmonious world. Only when I went out did I encounter 2 antelopes fighting each other. Back then, my teacher told me that antelopes were like that because they were beasts. They didn't know benevolence and modesty. If they understood benevolence and modesty and knew that they were the same kind, they wouldn't fight like that. In the end, the 2 antelopes suffered vital injuries and bled to death. That was the first time I saw life die, so it left an extremely deep impression on me. It was also the first time I understood why the world needed benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom, the harmonious world. But the one who truly made me understand the weight and meaning of the harmonious world was you, king of foreign lands. Li Junxian suddenly looked at Wang Chong and said. Wang Chang's body trembled at these words, and he raised his head to look at Li Junxian. These words caught him by surprise. Wang Chong had never imagined that this mysterious manipulator of the Confucian school would have a connection to him. King of foreign lands, perhaps you don't know, but the first time I saw death on a large scale, experienced the cruelty of war, truly acknowledged the principle of the harmonious world, and made it my lifelong wish to carry it out was when the War of the Southwest erupted. You led more than 1,000 clan experts and became a legend on that battlefield. That was the first time I saw what the Azura Hell was like. The entire mountain was littered with corpses. Hundreds of thousands of corpses were strewn all over the place like weeds. The earth turned from green to red, and blood flowed like rivers. 10 some days after the end of the war, the stench was still pungent. Intestines and brains were exposed. That was the first time I was touched, the first time I truly understood that the difference in thinking between people, between countries, and that the selfish desires of people could cause so much harm. Wang Chong said nothing, but his eyes were filled with shock. He had never known that this mysterious manipulator of the Confucian school had this kind of connection to him, much less that such a person had arrived at the end of that war. The War of the Southwest was only the beginning. I went to other places, Baiting, Anong, and Talas and Karasan, where you forged your current reputation as the war god. Li Junxian slowly spoke, a look of reminiscence in his eyes. In the Southwest, I believed that I had seen the pinnacle of war, but only in Talas and Karasan did I realize that my thinking was too simple. For the first time, I learned that the number of deaths in war can be counted in the millions, and that this number can still be increased. King of foreign lands, perhaps you believe that this is our first meeting, but this is not the case for me. In the Southwest, the war had already ended, and I had never met you before, but in Karasan, I truly saw you for the first time. When you rode back from Sindhu, all the generals lined the streets to welcome you. You might not have noticed me, but I was watching you from within the crowd. Li Junxian slowly said, a look of reminiscence in his eyes. Wang Chong was quiet, but his mind was extremely solemn. Wang Chong had always believed that these people had only recently begun to appear, but he had never imagined that all this had begun during the War of the Southwest, perhaps even before that. He had far too little understanding of this opponent, so Wang Chong did not speak, nor did he interrupt him. Instead, he carefully listened. It is precisely because I have experienced the cruelty of war that I have come to understand the importance of benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom, and come to accept the words harmonious world. Some deaths are heavier than Mount Tai, some are lighter than a goose feather. If I can fulfill my long-cherished wish of ending all the calamities and wars in the world, have all the common people, whether they are from the Tang dynasty or the barbarians, accept and approve of it, Fulfill the ideals and spirit that the 100 sages were unable to fulfill. Is this not more important than all the fame and wealth? Only this way can I not let down this life. King of foreign lands, realizing the harmonious world is the ultimate goal of everything. This goal requires the participation of countless capable people, all of them working together. Thus, the Grand Preceptor and King Chi participated. King of foreign lands, even though you refused me last time, I still hope that you will carefully think about it. If you and I work together, we will have a much greater chance of realizing this goal. Li Junxian looked at Wang Chong and solemnly said. The restaurant was quiet, everyone following Li Junxian to Wang Chong, their eyes brimming with anticipation as they awaited his reply. Are you finished? After some time, Wang Chong suddenly said, I'm not sure. People of different paths cannot make plans together. Relax, I will never work together with you. Wang Chong's first words caused the faces of all the Confucians in the tavern to pale. King of foreign lands, you refuse to come to your senses. With a furious roar, a figure to Li Junxian's right suddenly stood up. A black-clothed man with no eyebrows, no beard, and no mouth mask stood up and angrily glared at Wang Chong. Sword Ghost, sit down. Li Junxian's snow-white sleeves flapped in the wind as he suddenly waved his hand and stopped the people behind him. King of foreign lands, can you tell me why? Chapter 1280. Heh. Wang Chong faintly chuckled. Young Master Li, the universe, the sun, moon, and stars all have their own Tao, all things have their own principles. Rivers flow from high places to low places, the sun, moon, and stars rise from the east and set in the west. These are all simple truths that everyone knows. But your actions and your methods are destined to fail. An antelope can coexist with a goat, but a tiger and a lion cannot share a cage. Forcing the antelope to eat meat while the tiger and wolf eat grass will only result in a sudden death. I can understand your original intentions, but the Abbasid Caliphate and Yusang are tigers and wolves, not goats. The concept of the strong preying on the weak has already been deeply ingrained in their hearts. Just a few schools and wishful thinking won't succeed. Wang Chong sternly said. These people were too one-sided. This was no longer a question of success, but the price the Central Plains would have to pay for their one-sided, wishful thinking. He, King of foreign lands, rivers flow from high places to low places, but people can carry water from low places to high places. The sun, moon, and stars rise from the east and set in the west, but when they are not present, people can light torches to illuminate the night sky. There are some things that, if one doesn't even have the courage to try, how can one know if they will succeed? Li Junxian sternly said, his expression determined. But what if they fail? Do you know how great of a price you will have to pay? For the sake of your ideals and ambitions, do you know how many people will have to be sacrificed? In the War of the Southwest, more than 400,000 people died, but only 100,000 some of them were soldiers of the Tang dynasty. In the battles of Talas and Khorasan, more than 1 million people died, but only 200,000 some of the Tang dynasty soldiers died. This is already unbearable for you. But if your plan fails, do you know how many people of the Central Plains will die? Several 100,000? Several million? You will never be able to imagine that number. Have you ever thought about this? Wang Chong sternly demanded. This time, Li Junxian said nothing. Instead, he slowly closed his eyes as if in thought. After a long while, his voice resounded through the restaurant. Everything has a price. In the war between Qin and Zhao, both sides lost more than 400,000 people, and countless commoners were implicated. In the Battle of Fei River, more than 800,000 soldiers were wiped out, and when the former Sui attacked the Goguryeo Empire, the number of casualties reached 1 million, and more than 5 million commoners were implicated. In the end, it led to the destruction of the Great Sui. Throughout the dynasties, there are countless examples like this. As long as the war doesn't end, the deaths and injuries will never end. Since ancient times, the number of people who died and were injured because of ideological differences is more than 10 million. If we can achieve the great harmony of the world and put an end to war, then all the sacrifices will be worth it. Li Junxian sternly said. His voice was extremely calm, without the slightest ripple of emotion. It was like he was speaking of an ordinary and trivial matter. Ridiculous. You're treating the fate of the country like a game. Wang Chong paled at these words and couldn't help but harshly rebuke him. These people were all true madmen. Under the banner of ideals and righteousness, the people of the world were just pawns on their chessboard. They said it was for the world, but they didn't care about the lives of the people. With the calamity upon them, the Tang dynasty would not be able to endure their torment. No matter what, Wang Chong could not allow them to succeed. All of you should give up on this idea. The people of the Great Tang are not tools for you to achieve your goals. I don't care if you're doing this for the harmonious world or whatever, and I don't care how noble your goals seem, and I certainly don't care what banner you're flying. As long as I live, your goals will never succeed. Wang Chong's words were firm and brimming with determination. Wang Chong had gone to great lengths to pacify the southwest and stabilize Talas precisely so that he could reverse the fate of the Tang dynasty and save the people of the world. These people seemed to have the same goal as him, but in reality, they were doing the exact opposite. The Central Plains and the millions of people of the world had become the chips and tools for their gamble. Whether in his previous life or this life, Wang Chong would never allow these people to succeed. Buzz. All the Confucians in the restaurant instantly paled at Wang Chong's words. Wang Chong was the new war god of the Tang dynasty, the first imperial prince of a different sex in the last several hundred years. Whether in the imperial court, the people, or the military, Wang Chong wielded enormous influence. If Wang Chong was determined to make an enemy of them, their plans would be thwarted at every turn. Moreover, the Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, with 3 generations of them serving as ministers and ministers. Once this faction was gathered, it would be no small force. King of foreign lands, you're saying that you're determined to make an enemy of us. Across the table, Li Junxian's expression chilled as he finally paled. From start to finish, he had been trying to win over Wang Chong. With the help of Wang Chong, the king of foreign lands, they would face much less pressure. But things did not go as he wished. Wang Chong appeared to have steeled his heart to oppose them, and this was the last thing Li Junxian wanted to see. It's not that I'm making an enemy of you, but that you are making an enemy of me. The world is not your chessboard, and the people are not your toys. I will give you one last chance. Pull back before it's too late. Otherwise, I will uproot all of you. Zhang Chaoshu's matter is only the beginning. If I can pull out one Zhang Chaoshu, I can pull out countless Zhang Chaoshu and eliminate all the chess pieces you've placed in the imperial court. Wang Chong coldly said. Wang Chong had not come to Drunken Moon Pavilion purely to meet with Li Junxian. The naivety and childishness of these people had already done harm to the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong would not permit them to continue and inflict even greater harm. Bang! Everyone in the restaurant paled at Wang Chong's threat. Impudent! Arrogant! The Confucians in the restaurant angrily rebuked, and in the blink of an eye, a vast aura erupted from their bodies and locked onto Wang Chong. But a moment later, Li Junxian made a small movement that immediately stopped them. Wang Chong. Li Junxian's snow-white sleeves flapped in the wind as he stood up from his seat. The smile on his face was gone, replaced by solemnity. He no longer addressed Wang Chong as king of foreign lands, but by his name. The harmonious world is the trend of the times, and it cannot be changed by anyone's will. Whether you are a general, minister, or a marquis, all of you are insignificant in the face of this trend. A mantis trying to stop a chariot overestimates its own strength. In the end, not only will you not be able to stop the wheel of history, you will only invite the fire and be crushed into ashes. Whether it is the Southwest or the Northwest, I believe that you and I are the same kind of person. This is also why I have tolerated you time and time again. Thus, even though you rejected me last time, even though I knew that you might not agree, I was still willing to wait in this restaurant for you to come and try to persuade you one last time. Alas, your stupidity is even more formidable than I imagined. This is not a threat, but your own destruction. In the end, you and the Wang clan behind you will pay the price. Any stumbling block before the wheel of history will ultimately be crushed into powder, reduced to the dust of history. As Li Junxian spoke, he slowly straightened his body, his snow-white robe flapping in the wind. At the same time, a boundless and disdainful aura erupted from his body, one that was not one bit inferior to Wang Chang's. Wang Chang's pupils constricted at these words, his expression turning frigid. It seems that our paths are different and we cannot work together. Since that's the case, farewell. With these words, Wang Chong drained the wine on the table and left with a flick of his sleeve. In this meeting, neither Wang Chong nor Li Junxian had been able to convince the other. The two had different experiences and different ideals, foreordained that they would never be able to walk together. As Wang Chong stood up and walked out of the restaurant, all was deathly still, no one speaking. Wait a moment. As Wang Chong reached the stairs, a voice came from behind him. Li Junxian was standing in front of the table, staring at Wang Chong's back, his expression cold and aloof. Once we leave this place, we will forever be enemies. We already are. Wang Chong paused at the top of the stairs and continued forward. King of foreign lands, I will give you one last sentence. You did not kill Boran, but Boran died because of you. Ever since Karasan, your subordinates in the northwest have not been separated from each other. Li Junxian's voice came from behind him, tinged with a threatening tone. Buzz. The footsteps came to an abrupt stop, and Wang Chong's body trembled as he came to a stop. For the first time, Wang Chong paled. Many thanks. A moment later, Wang Chong came back to his senses and continued down the stairs. I appreciate the Confucian sect's good intentions. In the future, I will definitely pay a visit. The words Confucian sect caused all the Confucians in the hall on the second floor, including the young swordsman, to grimace. Even the white-robed and elegant Li Junxian, brimming with the aura of a leader, instantly lost his composure. But before he could speak, the sound of footsteps gradually faded away, and Wang Chong had already disappeared from Drunken Moon Pavilion. Your Highness, how was it? The moment Wang Chong walked out of Drunken Moon Pavilion, a group of people hurriedly went to greet him. Get on the carriage first. We'll talk after we get back. Wang Chong sternly said. The carriage began to move, leaving Drunken Moon Pavilion and heading toward the Wang family residence. Wang Chong sat within the carriage, his brow suffused with an intense gloom. Chapter 1281. Yes, Your Highness. The eagle's voice came from outside the carriage. Although he didn't know what was going on, the eagle still instinctively obeyed Wang Chong's orders. At any time, Wang Chong's orders could never be wrong. This had already been proven countless times. Wang Chong, has something happened in the northwest? A gentle voice came from the side. Su Yichin was sitting next to him, looking at Wang Chong's profile. She had known Wang Chong for so long, but she had never seen him so solemn. Wang Chong said nothing, only gave a slight nod as he recalled the words Li Junxian had said at the top of the stairs. Su Hanshan, Li Sai. In the blink of an eye, a thought flashed through his mind. Wang Chong recalled the two people in the northwest. In this period of time, Wang Chong had been so busy dealing with matters in the capital that he had neglected the situation on the border. The seizure of military authority and suppression of the entire military had not been Wang Chong himself, but the retreating Qixi Protectorate and the subordinates Wang Chong had left behind. A Confucian army supervisor and even a commander-in-chief was something that had never happened before. Wang Chong didn't need to investigate to know that many people in the army were unconvinced. Once they clashed with the Confucians in the army, they would definitely be used by the Confucians. From the resolve Li Junxian had displayed, he would not show the slightest mercy. The carriage rumbled off to the east. Flap flap, whoosh whoosh whoosh. In just a few moments, an eagle soared into the sky, carrying a letter with it as it hurriedly flew toward the northwest. Wang Chong looked through the carriage window at the departing eagle and inwardly sighed in relief. No matter what with this letter, there wouldn't be too many conflicts in the army. As long as Su Hanshan and Li Sai weren't too impulsive, they wouldn't give the other side any leverage. Your Highness. After an unknown amount of time, a voice came from outside the carriage. The eagle hesitated, wanting to say something but hesitating. "Speak," Wang Chong said with his eyes closed. "Since you've already discovered him, why didn't your highness attack him? At least capture him. This way, they can minimize their losses to the Tang dynasty." The eagle said. When Wang Chong entered the Drunken Moon Tower, the eagle had been waiting outside. All the intelligence personnel were hidden in the surroundings, surrounding the place so tightly that even a fly could be seen clearly. The eagle had thought that Wang Chong would definitely take action and capture the culprit after he had finally found the culprit after so much effort. The crisis this time would be resolved once and for all. But after waiting outside for so long, apart from the slight tremor at the beginning, there was only silence. Nothing else happened after that. The eagle, "I know what you're thinking, but now is not the time." Wang Chong closed his eyes and calmly said, "And killing him won't solve the problem. Moreover, killing him won't solve the problem at all." The eagle and the others did not understand that they were not fighting a single person or an unprecedented faction. It was impossible for a young man of 26 or 27 to rely on his own strength to control the Grand Preceptor, King Qi, the Prime Minister, and the First Prince. Behind him, there was an even more powerful force. Li Junxian was only the leader they had chosen. Killing him wouldn't solve the problem. That faction could eliminate a new leader. Moreover, the people in the restaurant did not represent a martial arts sect, but a spirit and ideology that had been passed down for thousands of years. They had suppressed the military, summoned him from Khorasan, and suppressed the military not through martial arts, but through ideology, spirit, and strategy. In a battle of this level, martial arts were not very useful. The body could be destroyed, but the spirit and ideology could not be so easily destroyed. And even if he killed Li Junxian, he could still interfere in the imperial court and continue suppressing the Bureau of Military Personnel and the military. This was why Wang Chong had not attacked. But now that he had finally found the leader of this faction and tracked him down, once he killed him, those people could quickly choose another leader. At that time, it would be even more difficult for Wang Chong to find and understand them. When a faction moved from the light to the shadows, it was almost impossible to capture. Moreover, Old Eagle and the others had neglected one most important factor, Li Junxian's martial arts. Wang Chong once more recalled the scene in the restaurant where he had touched wine cups with Li Junxian and tested each other's strength. At present, Wang Chong's cultivation was unrivaled in the world, infinitesimally close to the subtle realm. But if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would have never believed that there was someone in the same generation as him who possessed a similar level of cultivation. That white-robed youth in the restaurant, Li Junxian, possessed unfathomable strength, definitely surpassing the great general level, and in terms of psychic energy, he was probably even stronger than Mazel. The reason why Wang Chong was able to reach such a level of cultivation at the tender age of 18 was due to the experience of his 2 lives and his constant hard work. In addition, he possessed a wondrous technique like the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art, which allowed him to constantly absorb energy from all kinds of powerful opponents. However, the other party was only 26 or 27, yet he possessed such a powerful cultivation, able to stand on equal footing with him. This wasn't something that could be explained by hard work. Behind him, there was a powerful and unimaginable force. The Confucian sect. A thought instantly emerged in Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong had carefully observed the Confucians in Drunken Moon Pavilion and noticed that a considerable number of them had a black insignia on their wrists, identical to the one on the 3 Confucian experts who had taken over his military authority in Khorasan. At the start, Wang Chong had only vaguely sensed that he had seen it before, but he couldn't remember where. But in this period of time, Wang Chong finally remembered. He had never seen this unique insignia in this life, but it came from his memories. When the last of the human experts had gathered together at the end of the world, a group of Confucian experts had this unique insignia on their wrists. They had been running around, loudly proclaiming their theories, and they were extremely unique in the apocalyptic world. Later on, the otherworldly invaders had once more invaded the camp, and these people and some other apocalyptic experts had vanished in that battle. Wang Chong had not paid any special attention to them. He only knew that they called themselves the Confucian sect, and that they had a black insignia on their wrists that ordinary Confucians did not have. The two were identical. In the cycle of history, when he was reborn and changed the Southwest and Talas, pushing the power of the Tang dynasty and the influence of the militarists to its peak, history began to change. The Confucian sect, which had not appeared in his last life, stepped onto the stage of history and began to suppress the militarists. Let's go. Let's go back first. Wang Chong quickly came back to his senses. The enemy's tracks had been revealed, and the culprit behind the curtain had been revealed. He needed to think of a countermeasure. Young master, this is impossible. How could he know about our Confucian sect? As Wang Chong was leaving Drunken Moon Pavilion, a middle-aged scholar of around 34 walked up behind Li Junxian and stared in shock in the direction Wang Chong had left. The matters of our Confucian sect have always been secretive. Other than a few core members, not even the Grand Preceptor knows much about it. How could a teenager like him know about the existence of our Confucian sect? The middle-aged scholar's words were exactly what everyone else was thinking. None of the words that Wang Chong had said could compare to the words Confucian sect that Wang Chong had uttered. This was an indescribable feeling. It was like a person had hidden a secret for a very long time, believing that no one would notice, only to discover that a single sentence from their opponent had revealed it. The restaurant was quiet. Li Junxian, dressed in snow-white robes, also had a pensive look in his eyes. For some reason, his straight and imposing brows had creased. The middle-aged scholar's doubts were also his own doubts. The threat that Wang Chong posed to them was far greater than they had imagined. The Confucian sect had never thought about hiding behind the scenes. If they wanted to change the world, they would eventually have to step out from behind the scenes and onto the stage, but Li Junxian had imagined that this would take a very long time. Ever since the incident at Karasan, countless factions had been investigating him, but none of them had been able to find anything. But Wang Chong had only been in the capital for 3 or 4 days, yet he had already been forced out, and in less than 10 days, he had found his true body. His true identity would probably be discovered much earlier than he had expected. This made Li Junxian feel like he was facing an extremely sharp sword, and the tip of this sword was aimed at his vitals. Young master, this king of foreign lands poses far too great a threat to us, and he's not willing to work with us. He'll eventually become a stumbling block that will severely affect our plans. If we had attacked just now, we would have had an extremely high chance of killing him. Why didn't young master let us attack? At the same time, an old voice came from the left, and another Confucian old man in his 50s walked up from behind. His expression was old-fashioned, and his eyes shone with a dangerous light. This Confucian elder had given off the impression of being extremely weak and insignificant. But now, with Wang Chong gone, the elder finally revealed a portion of his cultivation. In a flash, a majestic energy erupted from his body, not one bit inferior to Wang Chong's or Li Junxian's. Elder Song, you're right. This youngest son of the Wang clan is likely to become our greatest obstacle in the imperial court. But now is not the time to touch him. Talas, Karasan, and the Southwest, 3 major battles in total, have pushed his reputation to its limits. You saw it when he returned to the capital. Not only in the court, but even among the common people, he has an extremely high reputation. If we kill him at this time and kill him, it will only cause the common people to resent him. In the end, our plan will fall short of success. Li Junxian calmly said. Chapter 1282. Clang. At this moment, the sound of a bell came from outside Drunken Moon Pavilion, accompanied by cheers from the crowd on the street. It was finally time to commemorate the Buddha's birthday. Young master, it is time to offer sacrifices to the saints. A figure stepped forward and whispered. It was none other than the white-robed scholar Li Junxian who had taken Li Junxian's place in the wooden door. Li Junxian blinked, took in a deep breath, and quickly turned around. Someone at his side had already offered him a prayer written in cinnabar. The strength of the world, the hearts of all things, the 100 saints of the 100 saints. We of the younger generation of the Confucian sect, Li Junxian, are bound to carry on the great wish of the 100 saints, to work together as one to realize the long-cherished wish of the 100 saints of the great harmony of the world, to unite the 4 seas into one, to eliminate the scourge of war and bring peace to the world. The great Tao is difficult, and sacrifices are bound to be made. As long as the common people are fortunate and no longer treated like grass or fish, even if our bodies are crushed, we will not hesitate. This oath is borne by the heavens and earth, witnessed by ghosts and gods. With the white-robed Li Junxian at their head, the group raised their wine cups, their expressions solemn and their eyes brimming with determination. The loud and clear voice resounded throughout the entire restaurant, but under the effect of an invisible force, the voice was confined within the restaurant. Even the waiters and the shopkeeper behind the counter on the first floor, who were close by, had lazy expressions on their faces as if they couldn't hear anything. It was as if they were in another world that was separated from the rest of the world. To the saints! To the saints! Once the prayer was finished, Li Junxian raised his cup and drained it in one gulp. Soon after, everyone else in the restaurant, their expressions suffused with determination, also drained their cups. "Young master, do you need me?" Once the ceremony was over, a voice came from behind Li Junxian. The black-robed man wearing the white mask slowly walked up to Li Junxian, his hands gripping a simple and unadorned sword. At the same time, everyone in the room focused on Li Junxian. The mood was solemn. The 100 saints of the 100 saints were the final ceremony. "There's no need." After a few moments of silence, Li Junxian shook his head and extended his right hand to take the sword from the black-robed man. Swish! Without the slightest hesitation, the black hairband on Li Junxian's head was cut in two. The moment the black hairband fell to the ground, it seemed to weigh a great deal. Cutting off his hair was like cutting off his head. Once it started, there was no turning back. "Let's go!" With a grave expression, Li Junxian walked out of Drunken Moon Pavilion with his snow-white feet, followed by the rest of the group. The Wang family estate was heavily guarded. At this moment, in the study, Wang Chong sat motionlessly with his eyes closed, meditating. In front of him was an old map of the continent. This was the map that Daluan Ruozhen had brought out of Uzan, the most precious map of the world. At this moment, the territories of Uzan, the Eastern Turks, the Western Turks, the Goguryeo Empire, the Shi, the Khitans, and Arabia to the west had all been marked out by Wang Chong with black pieces. Moreover, 3 small red triangular flags had been planted in the territories of Arabia, Uzan, and Yuzhou to the northwest. Troubles from within and without. After a long while, Wang Chong opened his eyes and gave a deep sigh. In this massive upheaval in the imperial court, Wang Chong would not just have to face Li Junxian and the mysterious Confucian sect he led, but also the many enemies of the Tang dynasty on the border. Although the Tang dynasty had won major victories at Talas and Khorasan, it had also paid a heavy price. The Tang dynasty had gone to great lengths to obtain its current situation, but an internal strife had ruined everything. Wang Chong could even imagine that Uzan's Dalan Trinling, the Western Turks' Ishbara Khagan, the escaped Dewusili, the Goguryeo Empire's Yun Gaesaman, and Arabia's Mutasim III would all be beaming with joy, perhaps even adding fuel to the fire. They were using the conflict between militarists and Confucians to further tear the Tang dynasty apart. But this was not the only thing that worried Wang Chong. As he looked past the biting protectorate to the Turkic steppe in the north, no one knew better than Wang Chong that a little ice age rarely seen in centuries would soon sweep down from the north. Last year's blizzard of Khorasan, which had frozen hundreds of thousands to death, paled in comparison. In the face of this unprecedented winter, all the nomadic tribes of the north of the Central Plains would be forced to band together and march south to attack the Tang dynasty. And after that, that enormous army of otherworldly invaders that would not die even if their vitals were wounded would descend from the heavens and bring true death to this world. There was far too little time left for him. Swish! Wang Chong picked up a brush from the brush rack, grabbed a few sheets of paper, and pressed them down with a paperweight. After a few moments of silence, he began to write. 1 incense stick's worth of time, 2 incense sticks worth of time, an hour, 2 hours. For more than 4 hours, Wang Chong remained in his study, his brush furiously writing. Countless thoughts surged through Wang Chong's mind. He was using everything he had learned to devise strategies and do his utmost to change the fate and development of this world. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. "Your Highness, this subordinate has a matter to report." The eagle's voice could be heard clearly. "Come in." Wang Chong quickly raised his head and said. The door creaked open, and the black-clothed and dusty eagle walked in. "Your Highness, something has happened. Ever since we left Drunken Moon Pavilion, our people have been keeping an eye on that place, but this subordinate just received news that the young man called Li Junxian and those Confucians have all disappeared." The eagle bowed in front of Wang Chong, a look of deep guilt in his eyes. Losing his target the first time was forgivable, but he had still failed this time. "There's no need to worry." The eagle had originally believed that Wang Chong would at least give him a few words of rebuke, but to his surprise, Wang Chong remained completely unperturbed, as if he had long ago predicted this situation. "That Li Junxian is much stronger than you, so it's understandable that you couldn't find him." Wang Chong indifferently said. No one could follow an imperial great general, and the Li Junxian that had appeared in Drunken Moon Pavilion just so happened to be an expert of the imperial great general level, one that was on par with him. If such a person wanted to, not even the eagle's entire force would be able to find him. What truly interested Wang Chong was something else. "You just said that those Confucians had also disappeared. What's going on? Li Junxian isn't easy to follow, but those Confucians should be much easier to follow. Our people were able to follow them at the start, but we quickly realized that after they left Drunken Moon Pavilion, they had all left the capital. Moreover, while we were following them, it was clear that another faction was interfering. If it wasn't a large number of identical carriages appearing along the way, it was a large group of people. Some of our scouts were even knocked unconscious." The eagle sincerely said. If the other party had remained in the capital, the eagle was confident that he could have followed them, but if they had left the capital, not even the eagle would have been able to keep up with the vastness of the 9 provinces, let alone if the other party had been prepared. Wang Chong frowned at these words, but he quickly relaxed. "Let them go. Since they've already revealed themselves, they can no longer hide. No matter how long they disappear, they'll eventually reveal themselves. Your subordinate understands." The eagle immediately lowered his head. "That's right." Wang Chong picked up a few envelopes from the table and passed them over. "These 6 letters have all been sealed. Send them to the addresses on them. This matter must be kept extremely secret. Not even Su Kui and the others can know of it. Understood?" The eagle was startled. He had been at Wang Chong's side for some time now, but he had rarely seen Wang Chong speak in such a solemn tone. Not even Su Kui and the others could know of this. "Yes, Your Highness." The eagle asked no more questions. Taking the letters, he quickly left the study. A few moments after Old Eagle left, a servant of the Wang clan hurriedly rushed into the room. "Young Master, Chamberlain of Palace Revenues, Lord Yang Zhao, requests an audience." "Oh!" Wang Chong had been meditating with his eyes closed, but when he heard these words, he opened his eyes. A strange look flashed through his eyes. "Tell him to wait a moment. I'll be right there." Ever since they parted, Wang Chong hadn't seen his sworn brother for a long time. Although the first time he showed up was in a gambling den, and he was in rags, even Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh in admiration. His sworn brother truly had a knack for his career. In terms of speed of promotion, the Chamberlain of Palace Revenues was the Holy Emperor's official in charge of finances. Even the Ministry of Revenue was under his control. It could be said that the economic lifeline of the entire empire rested in his hands. He was an important official who reported directly to the Holy Emperor in financial matters. The last time Wang Chong went to court, he had heard that Yang Zhao had become the Chamberlain of Palace Revenues. But at that time, Yang Zhao wasn't in the court. Wang Chong only vaguely knew that he had been sent to do something. Wang Chong didn't expect Yang Zhao to pay him a visit at this time. In the living room of the Wang clan, Wang Chong met with Yang Zhao, who had come to pay him a visit. It had been almost a year since they last met, but the Yang Zhao before him was completely different from before. He wore a bright red official robe, a black hat, and a golden fish talisman on his waist. Not only did he not have the slightest bandit aura, he even had the aura of a high-ranking official. But even though he had become the Chamberlain of Palace Revenues and was favored by the Holy Emperor because of consort Taijin, the current Yang Zhao clearly didn't have that carefree attitude. Instead, he seemed to be preoccupied and restless. Wang Chong, I finally see you. Chapter 1283. Big brother, long time no see. Wang Chong smiled, not minding at all. He pointed at a nearby table, indicating that Yang Zhao should sit down with him. At the side, a servant girl had already changed the tea and served new pastries. Big brother, you seem to be in such a rush. Just what matter could make you so anxious? Could it be that the Confucians will impeach you? Wang Chong took up the teacup on the table, took a sip, and faintly smiled. Worthy brother, I don't have any military authority in my hands, and I'm not their enemy. How could they possibly look favorably upon me? But if I don't handle this matter well, the Confucians might really impeach me. Yang Zhao sighed, a worried frown on his face. Oh! Wang Chong's brow rose, and a serious expression appeared on his face. You make it sound so serious. Just what is it? This is also related to you. Do you remember the gold yuan certificates you suggested to His Majesty? Yang Zhao's brow furrowed, but he began to talk about a matter that Wang Chong had suggested to the Ministry of Revenue long ago. Whether it's gold or silver, it doesn't matter if it's a small family, and it doesn't matter if they carry a few pieces of silver. If they want to travel far, they can just wrap it in a cloth and tie it to their waist, and it'll be enough for traveling. But now that the Tang dynasty is powerful and prosperous, and the economy is booming, there are countless wealthy merchants coming and going, and the money flowing in and out every day is like flowing water. This is truly spending money like flowing water, and this is no small sum. This is especially true for some of the great clans. With centuries of inheritance, they run several caravans and influence the prices of goods in the various commanderies of the 9 provinces. Tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of taels of gold and silver are extremely inconvenient to carry around. Thus, the imperial court adopted your plan and vigorously promoted gold yuan certificates. Later on, after many twists and turns, His Majesty entrusted this matter to me. At the start, it truly did resolve many problems, but later problems arose. For some reason, many factions have begun to reject the use of gold yuan certificates. For the same item, they would pay the full amount if it was in real gold or silver, but if it was in gold yuan certificates, they would ask for 20%, 30%, or even more. Gold yuan certificates were becoming less and less valuable, and many factions were unwilling to use them. If they could avoid using them, they would do their best to avoid them. They would rather carry heavy chests of gold and silver and risk being robbed by bandits than accept the imperial court's gold yuan certificates. You also know that the imperial court's gold yuan certificates are soft. If they don't accept them, there's nothing we can do. Not only that, it was only the great clans of the border who initially rejected the gold yuan certificates, but later on, even the great clans of the capital began to resist. There were even people privately buying and selling gold yuan certificates. Although the imperial court had issued repeated orders, it was useless. If this continues, there will be a major problem. Once the bow is shot, there is no turning back. The imperial court has invested a great deal of time and energy into promoting gold yuan certificates. Once the gold yuan certificates are completely boycotted, the imperial court will immediately suffer grievous losses, and it might even affect the national economy and the people's livelihood. After all, the problem of gold yuan certificates is a problem of money, and pulling one hair can affect the entire body. The effects are not something that the imperial court can resolve just by taking back the gold yuan certificates. It might even cause a massive economic problem. The more Yang Zhao spoke, the more worried he became. Worthy brother, you also know that there are many people who refuse to accept my position as Chamberlain of Palace Revenues. Countless people in and out of the court, including those officials in the Bureau of Revenue, have their eyes on me. If I make a single mistake, they will pull me down from my horse and take advantage of the situation to doom me beyond redemption. I'm currently sitting on pins and needles. You were the one who invented the gold yuan certificates, so no matter what, you have to help me." As he spoke, Yang Zhao suddenly grabbed Wang Chong's arm like a drowning man clutching at a straw, his face brimming with fear. Wang Chong said nothing, but carefully examined Yang Zhao. He had heard a little about Yang Zhao's current situation. Although no one in the palace dared to criticize him to his face because he was consort Taizhen's cousin, there were quite a few people who were dissatisfied with him in private. The majority of their attacks focused on his birth and his addiction to gambling. But Wang Chong knew that the reason Yang Zhao had been favored and placed in an important position by the Holy Emperor was not just because of consort Taizhen. Although his birth was not very good and he had this and that problem, he had an astonishing talent for numbers and finance. To be able to acutely realize that the gold yuan certificates were not just a single thing, as well as their potential effects on the economy, was already proof of his talent in this area. And Wang Chong also knew that Yang Zhao had relied on his talent for economics to become minister. "Let me ask you, from the first gold yuan certificate to now, just how many gold yuan certificates have you printed?" Wang Chong straightforwardly asked. Not much." Yang Zhao immediately began to stammer. Not much? Not many would end up like this? If you want me to help you, tell me the truth." Wang Chong's gaze was sharp as if he could see into the depths of Yang Zhao's heart. No matter what he was hiding, it could not escape Wang Chong's eyes. "I printed a little too much. I only printed 800 million taels of gold." Yang Zhao trembled. "You said 800 million, so there's at least 1 billion. In less than 2 years, you've printed more than 1 billion gold yuan certificates. Do you really think this is a money tree? You can print as much as you want." Wang Chong coldly said, immediately seeing through the essence of the problem with the gold yuan certificates that Yang Zhao spoke of. The Tang dynasty pursued a strategy of enriching the people. Even though the country was wealthy, the imperial court's annual tax revenue was far from that, perhaps not even 100 million taels of gold. Yang Zhao had printed 1 billion yuan in one go, equivalent to 10 years' worth of revenue. The final result could be easily imagined. Yang Zhao was still too greedy. Although he was very talented in the field of wealth and economics, his gambler's nature had immediately erupted from the treasury of gold yuan certificates. He had completely used this policy of benefiting the people and future generations as a tool to make money. Although the majority of the money he had plundered had gone into the imperial court's treasury for the benefit of the people, his actions had completely destroyed the original intention that Wang Chong had had when he had suggested the imperial court establish gold yuan certificates. This kind of paper money and gold yuan certificates was becoming less and less valuable, and they were even being sold on the black market. In another world, there was a word to describe this situation: inflation, or more commonly, overissuance of money. When the imperial court had first introduced the gold yuan certificates, Wang Chong had suggested that the printing and distribution of gold yuan certificates had to be done with great care. They could not be indiscriminately issued or overissued, but all this had still happened. "You're too greedy," Wang Chong sternly said, his expression much colder. "It would have been better if the gold yuan certificates hadn't been issued, but now they're all over the world. Even if you want to take them back, it's already too late. What's done can't be undone. There are some things that, once done, cannot be undone. If the matter of the gold yuan certificates is not handled properly, do you know what will happen?" Yang Zhao said nothing, but his face paled. "You don't know the specifics, so I'll tell you. The first step is to use gold yuan certificates to buy them. They cost 20 to 30% more than gold. Let me tell you, this is only the beginning. Soon, the gold yuan certificates will be constantly depreciated, and a gold yuan certificate worth 100 taels of gold will be worth only 50 taels of gold. And this is a conservative estimate. Once something like this happens, there will definitely be noble clans buying gold yuan certificates and then exchanging them with the imperial court. The common people have no channels, but the noble clans do. The gold yuan certificates are issued by the imperial court. In order to maintain the imperial court's prestige, no matter how much those noble clans exchange, the imperial court will have to redeem them. and the gold yuan certificates will become less and less valuable. And in the end, the gold yuan certificates will really be no different from paper. If you issue 1 billion taels of gold, it will throw the entire currency market of the Tang dynasty into chaos. The common people will have things they can't sell, the merchants will have money they can't buy, the achievements of the Tang dynasty over decades, the efforts of several generations, the blood and sweat of millions of people will all be for naught. At that time, it will be a massive disaster. The wealth of the Tang dynasty will vanish into thin air in the blink of an eye. Wang Chong closed his eyes as he slowly described the future trajectory of this disaster. Buzz. Before Wang Chong could finish his words, Yang Zhao's face had already turned ashen, and cold sweat was dripping down his forehead. He was the Chamberlain of Palace Treasury, in charge of the empire's finances. If something like this really did happen, not even Consort Taizhen would be able to protect him. If the people became angry, he really would not be far from death. The Son of Heaven commits the same crime as the common people. Consort Taizhen was completely capable of protecting him in a small matter, but if something major happened and the officials attacked him, no one would be able to protect him. Worthy brother, save me. No matter what, you have to save me. Yang Zhao was drenched in cold sweat as he stubbornly clung to Wang Chong's hand. The veins on the back of his hand were bulging from the force. No one understood his current situation better than he did. In front of Wang Chong, he had still held back a little, but the true situation was far more serious than he had described. The situation had worsened far more than he had imagined. 3 months ago, when Yang Zhao had received the news, he hadn't cared at all. But now, 3 months later, Yang Zhao had no choice but to run over to Wang Chong for help. Did they print too much? I'll tell them right now to stop printing the gold yuan certificates. If I need to take back a portion, I'll have them take it back immediately. Yang Zhao stammered. He was already in a desperate situation. Taking back the gold yuan certificates was the last thing Yang Zhao wanted to do. After all, this was money. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yang Zhao would never do such a thing. But there wasn't much he could do now. This is just treating the symptoms and not the root cause. Even if this problem can be solved in the short term, it will still erupt in the future. Chapter 1284. Yang Zhao was struck dumb, his face as white as paper, and the cold sweat on his forehead flowed even faster. Only now did he feel some regret. He had been too greedy and taken the position of Chamberlain of Palace Revenues. Wang Chong said nothing, his fingers lightly rapping on the table. No matter the era, parallel world, or space-time, inflation was a major problem. At best, it could drag a country from prosperity into decline, and at worst, it could cause the country to collapse. In the end, it would be the common people who would suffer. All wealth would be plundered, and all that was left was a pile of worthless paper money. Wang Chong's fingers echoed through the study, crisp and clear. After some time, Wang Chong's voice finally resounded through the room. Relax, the situation isn't that bad yet. Fortunately, you were able to discover these potential problems ahead of time, so we still have enough time. You also don't need to think about taking back the gold yuan certificates. Rather than blocking them, it's better to channel them out. The last method is to channel them out. Before Wang Chong could finish speaking, Yang Zhao immediately spoke, his eyes brimming with hope and expectation. It's very simple. The great clans and common people don't accept gold yuan certificates because you printed too many, and there are too many circulating on the market for the Tang dynasty to digest. So all we need to do is spend this money, digest it, and resolve this problem. Wang Chong confidently said, a wise light in his eyes. Yang Zhao was instantly confused. Wang Chong himself had said that there were too many gold yuan certificates to digest. In this situation, how could they resolve the problem? The Tang dynasty naturally can't digest it. But you forgot that the Tang dynasty is bordered by so many countries. Uzan, Arabia, Goguryeo, the Eastern and Western Turks, the Shi, the Khitans, Mengshi-Zhao, and the kingdoms of the Western regions. Aren't these all potential markets? Wang Chong's eyes were as sharp as candlelight. He had long ago understood what Yang Zhao was thinking. In the past, we might not have been able to do anything. But now, hadn't the Tang dynasty reached an agreement with the neighboring countries? Since they had come to an agreement, they shouldn't refuse the gold yuan certificates, right? These countries shouldn't do something so insincere, right? Since that's the case, then push the gold yuan certificates to all the countries bordering the Tang dynasty. When the Tang dynasty's militarists and Confucians fought, the other countries sat on the sidelines and watched the fire from the other side, even adding fuel to the fire in the dark. Now it was time for them to pay the price. Buzz. Wang Chang's words were casual, but when they entered Yang Zhao's ears, it was like he was struck by lightning, and even his eyes widened. All the neighboring countries of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chang's words had opened another door for Yang Zhao. Even when he was at his most greedy and insane, he had not dared to have such thoughts. He had always heard that Wang Chang's art of war was extraordinary, his thoughts bold and imaginative, causing all other generals to pale in comparison. Yang Zhao had no interest in war, but at this moment, he was suddenly able to sense Wang Chang's imaginative thoughts for the first time. Indeed, the Tang dynasty's daily expenses, traveling north and south, could not digest 1 billion taels of gold yuan certificates. Even the Arabian Empire had only stored it in the hands of Mutasim III, not circulated to the outside world. But if these gold yuan certificates were circulated to Uzan, Arabia, the Eastern and Western Turks, the Goguryeo Empire, Mengshi-Zhao, and all the other empires bordering the Tang dynasty, they would truly be nothing. If they could be accepted by those wealthy merchants, then even 1 billion taels of gold in gold yuan certificates would be a drop of water, completely insignificant. And in this way, not only would they not need to buy back the gold yuan certificates, they could print even more, perhaps 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion, they could print even more. At this moment, Yang Zhao had to admit that he was tempted. Wang Chong had been watching Yang Zhao this entire time, taking in all the changes in his expression. Seeing this sight, Wang Chong chuckled. He lifted the teacup on the table and took a sip. He knew that Yang Zhao had already understood the situation. Perhaps only someone like Yang Zhao would be able to implement the gold yuan certificates and bring out their true power, and he would also have the motivation to do so. Notice, due to users' full efforts, the special mission, World Currency, has been opened. User is rewarded with 2,000 points of destiny energy. In addition, starting from now, for every 10 million taels of gold yuan certificates printed by the Tang dynasty, user will receive 100 points of destiny energy. And when the number of gold yuan certificates reaches 5 billion or 10 billion, user will receive an additional special reward. The wheels of history have rolled forward. From the past until now, no one has ever been able to truly implement a world currency that can be circulated throughout the world and accepted by all countries. Whoever controls the world currency will control an endless stream of wealth and the lifelines of other empires. Upon completion of the mission, user will receive an enormous reward. At this moment, the voice of the Stone of Destiny resounded in his mind. Wang Chong was also surprised by this voice, but his lips quickly curled into a smile. The world currency had been his original intention when he had first started implementing the gold yuan certificates. Worthy brother, many thanks. Wonderful. I just knew that you would definitely be able to help me. A familiar voice rang out in his ear. Yang Zhao had no idea what had happened to Wang Chong. His eyes were shining, his face red, and his expression excited. But Uzan, Arabia, and the other countries aren't fools. They're used to trading in gold and silver, so they probably won't accept it. Moreover, if even our own people won't accept it, they probably won't accept it either. Yang Zhao quickly thought of something, and the enthusiasm in his heart cooled. Uzan, Arabia, and Goguryeo were shrewder than anyone else. They would never accept anything that was disadvantageous to them. Moreover, Arabia had fought with these empires before, so they had even less reason to accept the gold yuan certificates. Sometimes it's not that they want to accept the gold yuan certificates, but that it's useless for them to object. Starting from now, you can order that at least half of the goods being circulated into foreign countries must be settled in gold yuan certificates. In addition, all transactions must be notarized by the authorities, and a certificate must be issued. In addition, as long as the goods are settled in gold yuan certificates, they will receive a tariff reduction. Wang Chong faintly smiled as he took a piece of candied fruit from the plate on the table and placed it in his mouth. In addition, the tea leaves, silk, porcelain, and salt that are the most common commodities traded between the East and the West can only be settled in gold yuan certificates. No one is allowed to privately use gold and silver to trade. Violators will be heavily punished and their right to trade will be revoked. In addition, all merchants doing business in the Tang dynasty must go to the authorities and exchange for a certain amount of gold yuan certificates. Only then can they obtain the right to trade in the Tang dynasty, as well as a tariff reduction. 80% of the merchants doing business in the Central Plains come for things like tea leaves, silk, and porcelain. If all these things can be bought with gold yuan certificates, they won't refuse. Moreover, human nature seeks profit and avoids harm. As long as they realize that there is profit to be gained from exchanging for gold yuan certificates, they will definitely accept them. And once these wealthy merchants set an example, the who of the other countries and the common people will quickly follow. As long as the use of gold yuan certificates becomes a habit, they will quickly spread to all the other empires. And the ease with which gold yuan certificates circulate will definitely allow them to be widely accepted by the other countries. This also means that besides those large denominations of gold yuan certificates, the empire will also need to print many smaller ones. 1 tael of gold, 2 taels of gold, 5 taels of gold, 10 taels of gold, 100 taels of gold. Thus, these smaller gold yuan certificates must all be produced. Only in this way can they be used on a large scale. As Wang Chong continued to speak, the entire strategy for the gold yuan certificates was being perfected. This was a strategy for a powerful country in a curve. In the current situation, the military was being suppressed, and the strength of the protectorates had been greatly reduced. They were in an extremely passive and disadvantageous position. The gold yuan certificates were the only tool that could restrain the other countries and give the Tang dynasty an advantageous position. Yang Zhao had been listening on the side the entire time. When he had first arrived, his face had been ashen and fraught with worry, but as he listened, the light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter, and the worry on his brow had been swept away. In the end, he was even more stunned by Wang Chong. "Ha, worthy brother. I, Yang Zhao, rarely admire anyone, but this time, your foolish brother truly prostrates himself in admiration. As expected, there is nothing in this world that you can't resolve. Sometimes, I really want to know how your head is constructed. If the gold yuan certificates really are as you say, your foolish brother won't be far from being promoted." Yang Zhao couldn't help but laugh once more, his unease and apprehension completely gone. "That's right. Speaking of this, I just happened to try it not too long ago." Suddenly, Yang Zhao said something that caught everyone by surprise. Wang Chong stared at Yang Zhao in shock. "Ha, although you're known as the war god and can do almost anything, you probably don't know about this matter." Yang Zhao chuckled, a mysterious look on his face. But before Wang Chong could ask, he couldn't help but speak first. "Do you still remember that not long ago, the Tang dynasty signed an agreement with Arabia to return 700 million taels of gold to Arabia?" Even someone as composed as Wang Chong couldn't help but be shocked by these words. "Big brother, you couldn't have." At that moment, Wang Chong seemed to realize something and stared in disbelief at Yang Zhao. The Tang dynasty and Arabia had negotiated a peace treaty and even signed an agreement. For Yang Zhao to dare to tamper with such an important matter was something that Wang Chong had never imagined. "Just how much did you tamper with the 700 million taels of gold?" Wang Chong got straight to the point. "Not much, just 300 million taels of gold. I sent someone to secretly change the 300 million taels of gold into 300 million gold yuan certificates." Yang Zhao was somewhat embarrassed by Wang Chong's stare. After all, this matter wasn't anything too glorious, and Yang Zhao's voice had unwittingly become much quieter. Wang Chong stared at Yang Zhao, speechless. 300 million tales of gold. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.